Story 1. Husband finally cut off his toxic mom and sis. When they had the audacity to demand we give up our dream house for my jobless Sil, her deadbeat gaming addict husband and their 6 kids. My in-laws have a very toxic relationship with my husband and it is starting to affect my life. You see, while growing up, my husband used to be the favorite golden child and Mill was extremely close to him. Jacob has told me that because his dad used to be quite busy with work, his mother and he spent a lot of time together, but I have noticed that his sister Sarah isn't treated the same by my Mill. Although I am sure that Mill loves both her children, I have noticed time and time again that she favors my husband more. I am sure Sil must have felt that growing up also. Which is why my husband has always tried to fill the role by being a good older brother to her and always being there for her. But the thing is that both Sil and Mill would sometimes behave so absurdly that it crossed the line. For example, when we first started dating, Jacob, who was still just a fresh college graduate at that time, and my in-laws, including Sarah, used to live in the same house. My in-laws had given my husband an entirely different floor so he could have his own privacy and invite whoever he wanted. This is why he would sometimes invite me over to his place to spend the night with him. However, on several occasions during the morning, Sil would barge into our room while we were sleeping, without knocking. As you can imagine, sometimes we were not even properly dressed, but she would act like it was completely normal and start talking to Jacob about very random things. This was extremely weird for me, as I was uncomfortable with her seeing me in my lingerie. Before anyone points out, I completely understand that Jacob lived with his family at that time, so I should have expected this, but is knocking on the door before you enter a room really too much to ask for? I guess sometimes siblings can be very close, but she and I didn't know each other that well when Jacob and I first started dating. Hence, I found it extremely disrespectful. So naturally, I talked to Jacob about it and told him that I wouldn't be coming over unless he installed a lock on his door. He agreed, but as you can imagine, Sil, who tried to barge into the door the next morning unsuccessfully, started yelling at us about why we had the door locked. She started jiggling the door and banging on it, asking her brother to let her in. Jacob finally let her in, and she stormed into the room questioning why he had installed the lock in the first place. When she noticed me, she pointed at me and started yelling at him. If it was because of the skank? I was shocked to hear how rude and disrespectful she sounded. Jacob told her that it was he who wanted to install the door lock, but Sil wasn't convinced. She angrily told him that they were siblings and that they shouldn't have any secrets between them. Jacob told her that he didn't have any secrets and that he had installed the lock so that she wouldn't barge in while he and I were sleeping, as it was really disturbing. Hearing this, Sil angrily flipped her head towards me and yelled that this was all my fault and that I was coming between her and her brother. This all seemed to be a bit too much for me, since I am very non-confrontational, so I excused myself to go to the washroom. I could hear her continue to yell and Jacob trying to pacify her. When she was finally gone, he came in to comfort me. He was apologetic for her behavior and assured me that he would talk to her again, so she would apologize to me as well. The next weekend when I came over, she apologized to me and gave me a very pathetic excuse that she needed to talk to Jacob very urgently about something. Hence, she thought it would be okay for her to come in. Jacob firmly asked her not to disturb us again, and she nodded meekly. Although this issue was solved, this wasn't her only weird behavior towards me and Jacob. If me and Jacob would disagree on something, even on small things like movies, and if Sil was around, she would start telling him how he should date someone who had similar tastes like him and that we were clearly wrong for each other. Jacob would shoot her a disapproving look, but she would just smirk. Another incident would be where she would ask me uncomfortable questions about my past, trying to dig into my life. Jacob and I had been honest about each other's past from the very beginning, but I didn't feel comfortable sharing it with his sister. But regardless of my feelings, she would ask me uncomfortable questions like, "Why did your ex break up with you? Were you not good enough for him?" Or say comments like, "My brother's past girlfriend was so much prettier than you." All of these questions and comments would be whenever she and I were left alone. I slowly started to suspect that she was trying to play this game with me and put me down. Initially, I kept my mouth shut, but over the days when it continued, one day I had just enough. I replied back to her taunt, saying how I liked my ex-boyfriend's family more than Jacob's family, since my ex-boyfriend didn't have nosy, overbearing family members. Sil looked surprised at my reaction, and this seemed to shut her up for a while. What I had told her was basically true. Even though Sil did have a weird relationship with my husband, Mill was no better than her. When I first came into his life, my Mill would ignore me. But once she realized that Jacob and I were getting serious, she started behaving like I was trying to steal her son away from her. She would purposefully ignore me at dinner or during family functions and act like I didn't exist. Jacob sometimes noticed this and would try to talk to her about it, but she has never changed. Mill once even called me stuck up and spoiled, just because my parents sent me to a private school and she was a public school teacher. I even know she tried to talk Jacob out of marrying me and told him to keep looking for a better partner than me. Fortunately, my husband didn't care about her opinion and proposed to me anyway. When Mill and Sil found out that he had proposed, they freaked out. Both of them called to tell me that perhaps this was a bad decision, and since Jacob wouldn't listen to them, I should end the relationship and give him back the ring. I found it very weird and refused to tell them that they were crossing a line by asking me to do something like this when I loved Jacob and wanted to spend the rest of my life with him. When they realized that they couldn't convince me, Mill changed her tune and begrudgingly told me that I should strive to be the best wife for him and take care of him the way that she has taken care of him all these years. I was a bit offended, but I tried to not take more offense to her words. Sarah, on the other hand, told me that I was clearly just a gold digger and that her brother deserved someone much more of his status. She threatened that she would make sure to expose me before our marriage so that Jacob would never marry me. After this conversation, I immediately talked to Jacob about everything, and he was taken aback at how rude they were towards me. He fought with them over this, but both Mill and Sil stuck to their tune that I wasn't good enough for him. He told me to ignore them and that he loved me regardless of what they thought. Although his words were comforting, I did feel bad that his own family wouldn't accept me. Jacob and I had already decided to pay for our own wedding, so when Mill offered to pay for half of our expenses, we declined graciously, with Jacob telling her how hard we had worked to save money just for this occasion. Instead of being happy for us, this made her even more upset, and she started to tell Jacob how sad she was that he didn't need her anymore. But Jacob's dad seemed very proud of us. His dad, unlike his sister and mother, was quite cool-headed and never had a problem with our relationship. Since Mill continued to complain to Jacob, we compromised by telling her that we would love it if she wanted to organize the rehearsal dinner for us. She agreed, and we appreciated the gesture. However, as the wedding approached, things took an unexpected turn. The first incident was when Sil invited herself to have dinner with us, telling Jacob how much she missed him. By this time, Jacob and I were living on our own after our engagement, so we thought she genuinely wanted to spend time with her brother, so we agreed. Jacob asked me clearly if I was okay with having dinner with her, and I begrudgingly agreed as I didn't want to be rude to my Sil, who was soon going to be my family. While we were having a good meal, Sil, seemingly out of the blue, started talking about how she absolutely detested cheating partners and cheaters were nothing but useless pieces of. We looked at her curiously, thinking where she was going with this, when Sil looked me square in the face and asked me how it felt to be a useless piece of. My brows furrowed in confusion, and then Sil began to yell, accusing me of having an affair with my coworker, Zach. Jacob asked her what she meant by that, and Sil triumphantly began pulling out pictures of me and one of my coworkers, waving them around and insisting that she had caught me red-handed. I already knew that I had never been unfaithful to Jacob since we started dating, so I was curious as well as to why she thought I was having an affair with my coworker. Looking through the pictures, they looked quite harmless. It's true Zach and I were close coworkers, but it's only because we had both started in the company at the same time and we helped each other whenever we made any mistake so that our boss didn't reprimand us later. Zach even had a girlfriend and Jacob knew about that. I don't have a lock on my phone, and I had always been quite upfront to Jacob about all my coworkers. These casual moments captured in the photos were twisted by my Sil into something they were not, evidence of an imaginary affair. In reality, it was far from her unfounded accusations, and I felt a surge of annoyance at her attempts to tarnish my integrity and strain my relationship with Jacob. Before I could speak to defend myself, Jacob, shocked and visibly upset, stepped in for me. He asked my Sil why she was following me around and taking pictures of me with my coworkers at various public places without anyone's consent. Sil, hearing this, started justifying that she only wanted to investigate me since I wasn't of their status and she was afraid that I was marrying him to take away his money. Jacob firmly told Sil that her claims were baseless and that she was creating unnecessary drama out of nothing. He tried to reason with her, asking her to stop spreading lies and trying to harm our relationship, but Sil kept yelling at him that he should open his eyes to the obvious affair that was going on. I also tried to tell her that we were just co-workers, but she vehemently stuck to her statements. The atmosphere grew tense as her accusations intensified. I had enough of her accusations and yelling, so I told Sil that I was going to file a police case against her for illegally taking my pictures and stalking me. Her expression turned petrified as she looked at me and asked if I was serious. I told her that clearly I had all the evidence and she had purposefully stalked me and taken these photographs of me with my coworkers without my consent and was trying to defame me with ridiculous lies. Sil looked at Jacob and then me and started to plead that this was all just to protect her brother and she didn't think it was such a big deal. She started to beg Jacob to talk to me since she had done all this for him, and if I filed a case it would hamper her work and her future. I firmly told Sil that only she could save herself at this point. Sil asked me what it was that I wanted, and I told her that I was not going to file a case against her as long as she stayed far away from my life. At this point, there was nothing that Sil could do to escape this situation. She looked at her brother, but Jacob supported me and told her that she should be grateful that I was willing to let this go since what she had done was clearly wrong. Sil begrudgingly agreed to stay away from me, and since that day she and I haven't talked. Jacob continues to have a relationship with her, but she has never dared to talk to me after that. Now, the second incident that occurred before our wedding was just the night before the wedding, during our rehearsal dinner. Mill, who had insisted on taking responsibility for our rehearsal dinner, declined our offer to help her in any way leading up to the event and told us that she was going to take care of it. However, upon arrival, it became evident that the preparations were not as anticipated. The rehearsal dinner turned out to be a collection of plastic tablecloths on picnic tables and cold Mexican food. During dinner, she kept acting upset, and it made the whole celebration feel a bit off. She got drunk and started behaving inappropriately with the other guests, saying she couldn't wait for the wedding stuff to be over and how stressful it had been, even though she did not contribute financially or in any planning. Eventually, my Phil got pissed off also and escorted her out. My Sil tried to protest, trying to justify her mother's behavior, but my Phil refused to listen to her. As you can imagine, it was a complete disaster, and I started freaking out that both these women would somehow spoil my wedding the next day as well. That night, Jacob and I had our first fight. I told him firmly that he needed to uninvited both Sil and Mill since clearly, with the way that they were behaving, they would definitely do something to upstage us during the wedding. My husband vehemently refused and tried to assure me that Phil would be there and he wouldn't let them get away. Then I had to threaten Jacob that if he did not uninvited his mother and sister, there would be no wedding the next day. Jacob was visibly shocked by my demand, as I knew exactly how I sounded, but I was anxious thinking about what these women would be up to. I didn't want to be embarrassed again in front of my family and friends on my wedding day. Jacob clearly didn't have strong boundaries, but I hoped with this ultimatum he would understand just how much they were starting to affect our relationship. Thankfully, Jacob did understand and made the right choice. He called his dad early in the morning and let him know that his mother and sister were uninvited. Phil didn't even seem surprised and assured him that he would make sure that Mill and Sil wouldn't show up uninvited. After a few moments of our conversation with Phil, Mill and Sil started calling Jacob continuously, clearly to convince him to let them come to his wedding, but Jacob firmly told them that after how they behaved with me throughout our relationship, he didn't feel comfortable with them during the wedding. Hearing this, Mill started telling him how bad of a woman I was for coming between him and his mother, and Sil tried to reason with him as well, but Jacob stuck to his guns. I did feel bad that Phil couldn't come to our wedding because of his wife and sister, and believe me, I felt horrible for my ultimatum, but all my guilty feelings went down the drain when I later learned from some of Jacob's cousins that Sil and Mill had planned on wearing white dresses to our wedding. They told me how they all had a family WhatsApp group where there were only female members, and in this group Sil had encouraged others to wear white also, saying how there was no reason for the bride to be the only one wearing white. I was shocked at how low they could go just to hurt me. After learning of this, I was glad that they were uninvited. Jacob did miss his family, but he also understood where I was coming from. Overall, we had a great wedding, and no one tried to upstage us. But since that day, Mill and Sil stopped talking to me completely, which made me very glad, and I was perfectly comfortable with it. They would only invite my husband over for dinner or on special occasions, which I didn't mind terribly. Phil, on the other hand, was kind to me, and we continued to stay in touch over the years. Jacob and I saved our money meticulously and eventually bought a new house this year. It is our very first home, and as you can imagine, we were very excited about finally owning something this huge. His parents and Sil did come to visit our place for a small housewarming celebration, and on that day, to avoid them, I visited my parents and spent some time with my family. Now, coming to the main issue, last month, out of the blue, my Mill called me. This was very, very unexpected since she and I have never talked with each other since the day I got married to Jacob. Surprisingly, she asked me casually about how I had been and how my life was going. I was a bit taken by her sudden interest, but I answered her questions regardless. Then she started asking how it felt to live in such a huge house when it was just me and Jacob. Her words stung because Jacob and I had been wanting to get pregnant for a long time, but due to some infertility issues, I was unable to get pregnant. Jacob knew about this, and although we mourned that we might never be able to have children of our own, we had eventually accepted it. I had told Jacob several times when I first found out the news that he was welcome to divorce me if he wanted to, so he could eventually marry someone else and have his own children. But Jacob had always stuck by me. He loved me and told me that it was okay for us to be childless as long as we had each other. Obviously, our families also knew about this, which is why Mill subtly commented about it. She then went on to inform me that my sister-in-law was pregnant. I was shocked to hear this since this was going to be her 6th child. I had heard from Jacob how jobless her husband was and didn't believe in using a condom, which would lead to these accidental pregnancies. Sil's partner was the epitome of laziness and did nothing around the house to help her or the kids. I have heard from Jacob that he treats Sil like his personal maid. He never even pays any bills around the house. Sil works multiple part-time jobs while he spends the whole day gaming. Despite how much everyone has talked with her, Sil never breaks up with him. My Mill then continued saying that since Sil could no longer afford to keep working throughout her pregnancy, she thought it would be a good idea for me and Jacob to give up our place since it was too big for a childless couple like us. I was taken aback by her demand and struggled to form words. I asked her if she was joking with me, but Mill went on to say that she was, in fact, very serious and that Sil and her husband deserved to live in a bigger house, but since she did not have space at her own house to let them move in, she had asked them to move in with us. The weight of this announcement hung in the air, and I found myself trying to compose her response amid the whirlwind of emotions that now enveloped me. I explained to her how that this was our house, which we were still paying for. The notion of someone else moving in with us so abruptly, without even asking for our permission, was intrusive and ridiculous. However, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law emphasized that she had already talked with Jacob, and he had agreed with this. This seemed bizarre as me and Jacob always shared everything with each other, and I knew for sure that he would have definitely told me the news if he had agreed to let his sister and her family stay with us. I firmly told Mill that since the house belonged to both me and Jacob, he couldn't give the permission all on his own without my consent. No one was allowed to live here with us without both of us agreeing to it. To compromise, I told her that I would be happy to host Sil and her husband for a few days if that's what they wanted, but I wouldn't allow them to move in with me. Mill, on the other hand, started to yell at me that making space for my sister-in-law and her husband was expected of me as a dutiful daughter-in-law, and if I agreed to her demands, all our past issues would be forgiven. So in anger, I replied to her, "Sure, I will be happy to let them have our place, but you see, we are still paying for this place, and I know that if Sil and her husband move in, they won't be helping us with the mortgage or the bills. Hence, I think you should take some responsibility and help pay for Sil, her husband, and her children to live in our house. I will be happy if you can pay just the mortgage for us, and we can cover the bills for everyone. I know that you won't be able to pay the mortgage with just the one job you have, so tell me, when are you getting a second job to pay off the debt?" Mill, hearing this, erupted in a fit of rage, shouting and expressing her displeasure. She told me that it was ridiculous of me to ask her to pay the mortgage for us, and I retorted back that it was equally ridiculous for her to expect us to take care of Sil's family and to let them move in. This pissed her off even more, and she continued to yell while I smiled in satisfaction. She disconnected the call when she realized that I wasn't going to give in to her demands. Soon after, my sister-in-law called, yelling at me for daring to ask her mother to pay our mortgage. She continued saying how she always knew that I was just a gold digger, and I told her that it was she who was being a gold digger for trying to live with us, and if she ever wanted to see who the real gold digger was in the family, then she needed to look at her own partner who did nothing to help her out. This seemed to shut her up. I firmly told her that she could bicker with me all she wanted, but I am never allowing her family into our house unless they wanted to help us with our mortgage. She accused me of being heartless and prioritizing money over family. The tables had turned, and I felt relieved at the prospect of standing up for myself and not backing down, regaining control of my home. However, I do feel a bit guilty thinking about my ex-husband, and I am here on Reddit wondering if what I have done makes me an a-hole. Update 1. Thank you to everyone who has shown their support for me. To answer the most important question that everyone keeps asking, why would Mill even demand such a ridiculous thing from us? It's because my Mill has always been this entitled. Clearly, my husband has let this charade go on for far too long, and he and I need to sit down and have a serious talk about this. It's pathetic how Mill can lie about her own son just to get her own way. My Sil is just a pawn in her play who goes along with whatever her mom wants because Mill has always heavily favored my husband. Sil just listens to whatever her mommy says in the hopes that Mill favors her as well. In this case, Sil stood to gain from this situation since she could depend on us to pay for her bills and take care of her children while her worthless husband would do nothing. I am waiting for my husband to be back from his business trip so we can talk. I don't want to discuss this over the phone with him since it's too important. Update 2. It's been 3 days since my last update. As I had mentioned earlier, I was waiting for my husband to be back. When he returned and we could finally sit down and talk, I told him about how his mother had called me demanding that we give up on our house for his sister and her family. Jacob was clearly taken aback hearing this, and I went on to tell him the entire story. He then confessed that he had no idea about all this and that the only thing his mother had told him before he went on the trip was that his sister was pregnant. That's all he knew about the situation, and he had no idea that she would make such ridiculous demands. I told him firmly that I expected him to talk to Mill regarding this and deal with the situation since I can't handle his family, and he agreed. He called Mill in front of me and asked her why she had lied to me about him. Caught red-handed, Mill tried to backtrack, saying that she didn't exactly lie and that she knew he would have no problem with his sister living with us. So she had decided to take matters into her own hands and asked me directly. Jacob stopped her mid-track and asked her why she assumed that he would have no problem with Sil and her entire family moving in. Mill told him that he and Sil were close, so obviously that would mean that he would have liked to help her out by allowing her family to move in. Hearing this, I closed my eyes in frustration, but I kept my mouth shut since Jacob needed to handle his mother. My husband then firmly told her that there was no way that he was letting Sil, her jobless husband, and her 6 children move in with us and that she had no right to force us to take care of them. Mill started yelling that Sil really needed someone at this point, but my husband told her that it wasn't our responsibility and that if she wanted then she should take care of Sil. Mill then began to say how Phil didn't want that and that their house was too small, but we were living in such a huge house so we could easily help out Sil. She even went on to say since I was childless anyway, I could help Sil's kids, and this would make me feel fulfilled. My eyes widened in shock, but for the first time, I watched my husband's face change color. He yelled back at her that she had no right to say something so insensitive about me, and that she couldn't use that against me to force me to take care of Sil's children. He continued telling her that Phil rightfully didn't want anything to do with Sil since she had become like a childbirthing machine, and that he was done with both of them. Mill tried to backtrack, but Jacob continued to yell at her that he had tried his best to have a good relationship with them even after they had continuously disrespected me. But he couldn't take this anymore. Mill started begging him, but Jacob told her that this was our house and I was his wife, and anyone who disrespected me disrespected him as well and didn't deserve to stay in his life. With those final words, Jacob cut the call. Since then, he has had no contact with both Sil and Mill. Phil did call to talk to him, but after learning of the entire incident, he understood exactly why Jacob had taken such a drastic decision. Phil talked and apologized to me on behalf of his wife, but I told him that it wasn't his fault anyway. Update 3. It's been an interesting 2 weeks. A lot of people suggested I install cameras around my place just in case Mill and Sil decided to show up and create a scene, so I did order them online and install them all around my place. Well, as luck would have it, they did decide to show up last weekend, knocking on my door while I was all alone. When I saw that they were here from my camera, I called Jacob immediately, and he said he was on his way. When I opened the door, there they were, my Mill and Sil looking furious. They demanded I let them in, but I stood my ground, refusing to allow them entry and telling them that if they had anything to talk about, they could talk to me from outside. Also, Mill started yelling about how heartless I was, accusing me of being greedy and selfish. I calmly told her that this was our home and they had no right to barge in uninvited. Mill continued her tirade, unaware of the cameras capturing every moment. I calmly reminded her of our previous conversation, reiterating that I would not be giving up my home for Sil and her husband, and that if she had anything further to talk about, she should wait for Jacob to come back home. Sil, in turn, started to yell that I was breaking up the family for no reason and that I was being too stubborn. She told me that not only was I a gold digger like she had always known, but now I was trying to take her brother away from them. I then informed them that whatever they were saying was being recorded in our cameras, and that I would be using this evidence to get a restraining order against them so next time they couldn't come 50 feet near our house. Their eyes widened in shock, and Mill yelled that I wouldn't dare to do that. I smirked at her and told her that if they didn't get out of our property this very minute, she would be receiving a legal order very soon. This scared them straight, and my Sil started to say how I was overreacting and that it wasn't a big deal. Fortunately, at this point, Jacob arrived. He walked towards us calmly and asked Mill what they were doing there. Mill rushed to hug him, but he deflected her and asked her firmly again what she and Sil were doing here. Sil started to say that they knew that it was me who was trying to control his life by not letting him talk to us and that they had come here to confront me. I rolled my eyes at how absurd they both sounded. Jacob clarified to both of them that it was he who had made the decision to go no contact and that he did not want anything to do with both of them. Mill started to beg him at this point to forgive her, but he simply asked them to leave the property or he would have no choice but to call the police. Their eyes widened in shock. Clearly, both of them had not expected this reaction from him. Jacob went on to tell them that if they ever showed up at our house again, then he and I would be free to call the police on them and have them removed forcefully. They looked devastated, but Jacob didn't care anymore. I felt relieved that my husband was finally standing up for me. Eventually, both of them left, still fuming. Since then, Jacob has talked with Phil also, who was as shocked as us that Mill and Sil had gone behind his back to show up at our house unannounced. He assured us that we were right not to let them in. He is also becoming increasingly frustrated with their behavior. I know that with Jacob being so firm about it and kicking them out, they will not dare set foot on our property ever again. If they do, well, I will contact a lawyer and send them a notice immediately. I am glad that my husband has finally realized how toxic his family is, and hopefully, they won't trouble us anymore so we can peacefully live our lives. I hope this is my last update since I want to move on from this situation as well. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. I refused to pay for my sister's wedding, so she turned my entire family against me. 2 months later, her fiancé reveals the shocking truth about her secret double life. I, 28F, have always had a complicated relationship with my older sister, Kelly, 34F. Our family dynamic was unusual from the start. Our parents, both successful lawyers, were rarely home. Dad was always at the office or in court, while Mom spent most of her time networking and maintaining the social connections vital to their practice. This left Kelly and me largely to fend for ourselves. Kelly, being 6 years older, naturally took on a caretaker role. At first, it seemed like a blessing. She'd make sure I ate, helped me with homework, and comforted me when I missed our parents. But as time went on, the line between sister and parent became blurred for Kelly, and she started exerting more and more control over my life. I remember one incident when I was about 10. I had made friends with a girl named Sarah in my class. Kelly, then 16, decided she didn't like Sarah because she thought her family wasn't good enough. She forbade me from hanging out with Sarah, going as far as to intercept notes we passed in class and deleting her number from my phone. When I cried and protested, Kelly said, "I'm just looking out for you. You'll understand when you're older." This pattern continued throughout my teenage years. Kelly chose my clothes, decided which extracurricular activities I could participate in, and even tried to influence my career path. She was convinced that I should become a lawyer like our parents, despite my interest in art and design. The summer before I started high school was particularly tense. I had been accepted into a prestigious art camp, but Kelly was dead set against it. She argued that it was a waste of time and would distract me from real studies. We had a huge fight, with Kelly threatening to tell our parents I was rebelling if I insisted on going. In the end, I gave in, spending the summer doing an internship at a law firm instead. I was miserable, but Kelly was pleased, saying, "You'll thank me one day for keeping you on the right track." Despite the tension, I still looked up to Kelly in many ways. She was smart, driven, and seemed to have her life together. When I graduated high school, she convinced me to attend her alma mater. She painted a rosy picture of us living together, with her showing me the ropes of college life. In hindsight, I should have seen the red flags, but at 18, the idea of having my successful older sister guide me through college seemed appealing. Living with Kelly in college was a nightmare. Our apartment became her domain, with rules reminiscent of our childhood home. She set curfews, limited my social activities, and constantly checked on my studies. If I went out with friends, I'd return to a barrage of texts asking where I was and who I was with. Financial issues added another layer of complication. Kelly, working her first job out of college, was always short on cash. She'd borrow money from me, usually without asking. When I confronted her about a missing $200 from my wallet, she brushed it off, saying, "What's mine is yours, right? Besides, I bought groceries last week." This pattern continued, with Kelly treating my student loan money and part-time job earnings as a shared resource. Things came to a head in my junior year when I met Jake. He was a transfer student in my graphic design class, and we hit it off immediately. For the first time, I had someone who encouraged my passions and respected my decisions. Kelly hated him from the start. She would make snide comments about his appearance, question his career prospects, and imply that he was only interested in me for money, ironic given her own behavior. Once, she even accidentally spilled wine on a project Jake and I had been working on for weeks. When Jake proposed after graduation, Kelly threw a fit. She cornered me in our apartment, ranting about how I was too young and naive to get married. "You're making a huge mistake," she yelled. "He's just trying to trap you. Don't throw away your future for some guy." That was the moment I finally stood up to Kelly. I told her that my relationship with Jake was none of her business and that I was tired of her controlling every aspect of my life. The argument got heated, with years of pent-up frustration pouring out. Kelly tried her usual tactics: guilt-tripping, gaslighting, even threatening to call our parents. But this time I stood my ground. I moved out that week, crashing on a friend's couch until Jake and I found our own place. The distance gave me perspective on just how toxic my relationship with Kelly had been. I started therapy to work through the years of manipulation and control. Over the next few years, my relationship with Kelly remained strained. I got a good job in marketing, allowing Jake and me to start saving for a house. Kelly, on the other hand, seemed to struggle. She changed jobs frequently, complaining about unfair bosses and toxic workplaces. She'd often hint that I should help her out financially, reminding me of all she'd done for me growing up. Last month, Kelly announced her engagement to her boyfriend of 2 years, Tom. I was surprised, given her previous stance on marriage, but I wished her well. A week later, she called asking for a favor. Kelly launched into a long speech about her dream wedding, describing a lavish affair that sounded more like a fairy tale than a realistic event. Then came the kicker. She wanted me to contribute $115,000 towards the wedding costs. I was stunned. $115,000 is a significant amount, especially considering Jake and I were saving for a house. When I hesitated, Kelly began her usual manipulative tactics. She talked about how she'd raised me and sacrificed her own youth for my sake. She said that as her only sister, it was my duty to help make her wedding special. Something in me snapped. Years of suppressed anger and resentment came pouring out. I told Kelly that while I appreciated what she did when we were kids, it didn't give her the right to control my life or my money. I pointed out all the times she'd taken advantage of me financially and emotionally over the years. I brought up specific incidents. The time she borrowed my entire summer job earnings to buy a designer bag, the countless times she'd belittled my career choices, the way she tried to sabotage my relationship with Jake. I told her that her sacrifices were her choice, not something I'd asked for, and that they didn't entitle her to my money or compliance as an adult. Kelly was furious. She called me selfish and ungrateful, saying I owed her for everything she'd done. She accused me of abandoning her when she needed me most and threatened to tell our parents and extended family that I was refusing to help with her wedding out of spite. That was the final straw. I told Kelly I wouldn't be contributing a cent to her wedding. Furthermore, I said I was done with her manipulation and guilt trips. I told her not to contact me again unless she was ready to apologize and change her behavior. It's been 3 weeks, and I haven't heard from Kelly directly. However, I've been bombarded with calls and messages from relatives. Apparently, Kelly has been telling everyone that I'm refusing to help with her wedding because I'm jealous of her happiness. Some family members are pressuring me to be the bigger person and reconcile with Kelly for the sake of family harmony. Despite the pressure, I'm standing firm in my decision, but I can't help wondering, am I wrong for refusing to help with her wedding and cutting her off? Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and the situation with Kelly has escalated in ways I never expected. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments. They've been a lifeline during this challenging time. A week after my post, our parents decided to intervene. They called a family meeting to sort things out between Kelly and me. I was hesitant to attend, remembering countless family meetings from our childhood where Kelly's version of events always seemed to prevail. However, I decided it might be an opportunity to finally make my parents understand my perspective. The meeting was set for Saturday afternoon at our childhood home. When I arrived, I was surprised to find not just Kelly and our parents but also our Aunt Linda, Mom's sister, and Uncle Bob, Dad's brother. Apparently, they were there to mediate. I immediately felt ambushed, remembering how Aunt Linda had always favored Kelly, while Uncle Bob prided himself on being the family's voice of reason. As we sat in the living room, surrounded by old family photos that seemed to mock the current tension, Mom started the conversation. She asked us both to explain our sides of the story. I took a deep breath and calmly recounted the events leading up to our falling out, including Kelly's demand for wedding money and her subsequent threats. I spoke about the years of manipulation, the financial exploitation, and the emotional toll it had taken on me. I brought up specific instances. The art camp I wasn't allowed to attend, the friends Kelly had driven away, the constant belittling of my career choices. I explained how Kelly's controlling behavior had continued into our adult lives, culminating in her demand for wedding funds. As I spoke, I noticed Kelly's face contorting with anger and disbelief. When it was her turn to speak, she spun a completely different narrative. According to Kelly, I had always been jealous of her and resented her for being the responsible one. She painted a picture of herself as a selfless older sister, sacrificing her own youth to raise an ungrateful sibling. She claimed that she'd only asked for my help with the wedding because she wanted me to be involved, not because she needed money. Kelly brought up incidents from our childhood, twisting them to fit her narrative. The art camp became a story of her protecting me from making a mistake that would derail my future. Her control over my friendships was reframed as looking out for my best interests. She even suggested that Jake had turned me against my family, poisoning my mind with ideas of independence. As Kelly spoke, I watched our parents' faces. They seemed to soften, nodding along with her words. Aunt Linda reached out to pat Kelly's hand supportively, while Uncle Bob gave me a disapproving look. When I tried to defend myself, to point out the inconsistencies in Kelly's story, I was interrupted or told I was being too emotional. Kelly kept bringing up things from our childhood, each anecdote carefully crafted to portray herself as the martyr and me as the ungrateful brat. The meeting dragged on for hours, with every attempt I made to explain my perspective shut down or dismissed. Kelly's tears, which started flowing at convenient moments, seemed to hold more weight than my words. The final straw came when our parents suggested a compromise. They proposed that instead of giving Kelly money directly, I should take charge of planning and paying for her bridal shower and bachelorette party. They framed it as a gesture of goodwill that would help mend our relationship. I was stunned. It was clear they hadn't heard a word I'd said about financial boundaries and Kelly's manipulation. Their solution was essentially to have me spend money on Kelly anyway, just in a different form. I refused. I stood my ground, telling them I wasn't going to be manipulated into spending money on Kelly's wedding events when I'd already made my position clear. This led to another round of accusations about me being selfish and not caring about family. Kelly seized this moment to deliver her coup de grace. Through tears, she announced that she had always dreamed of having her little sister as her maid of honor. But now she realized that dream would never come true. It was a masterful piece of emotional manipulation, and I watched as my family fell for it, hook, line, and sinker. The meeting ended with me feeling angry, betrayed, and more alone than ever. It was clear that my family had already decided I was in the wrong, regardless of what I said. Kelly had successfully painted herself as the victim, and I was cast as the villain. In the week since that disastrous meeting, the fallout has been significant. Our parents are barely speaking to me, sending only formal texts when absolutely necessary. I've been uninvited from several family events, including my cousin's baby shower and my uncle's retirement party. Kelly, on the other hand, is basking in the attention and sympathy she's getting. She's been posting on social media about healing from family trauma and how blood isn't always thicker than water. Each post garners hundreds of supportive comments, many from family members who now view her as some sort of wronged saint. The situation has forced me to reevaluate many of my relationships. Friends I thought I could count on have taken Kelly's side, swayed by her version of events. It's been a painful process of realizing who truly supports me and who was just waiting for an excuse to side with Kelly. Despite the pressure and the pain of being ostracized by my family, I'm standing firm in my decision. This whole situation has made me realize how dysfunctional my family dynamics are and how much Kelly's manipulation has shaped our relationships over the years. Jake has been my rock through all of this. He's helped me see that I'm not crazy for feeling the way I do and that it's okay to set boundaries with family. We're focusing on our plans to buy a house and build our future together, away from the toxic influence of my family. I'm still processing everything that's happened, but I'm more convinced than ever that I made the right choice in standing up to Kelly. It's painful to be at odds with my family, but I'm not going to let them guilt me into accepting toxic behavior anymore. For the first time in my life, I'm putting myself first, and while it's scary, it also feels incredibly liberating. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and things have taken an unexpected turn. I thought I'd share what's been happening, as it shed new light on the situation with Kelly. About 3 weeks ago, I received a call from Tom, Kelly's fiancé. This was unusual because Tom and I have never been close. In fact, our interactions have been limited to awkward small talk at family gatherings. He usually lets Kelly handle all family communication, so when he asked if we could meet for coffee to discuss something important, I was immediately on guard. Nevertheless, curiosity got the better of me, and I agreed. We met at a small cafe downtown, away from our usual family haunts. Tom looked nervous and uncomfortable, fidgeting with his coffee cup and avoiding eye contact. After some stilted small talk about the weather and his job, he dropped a bombshell. He and Kelly had broken up, and the wedding was off. I was shocked, to say the least. Despite our issues, I had genuinely believed Kelly was happy with Tom. But as he began to explain, I realized there was much more to the story than I had known. Tom proceeded to tell me a tale that confirmed many of my worst suspicions about Kelly, while also revealing new depths to her deception. Apparently, she had been lying to him about her financial situation throughout their entire relationship. She had told him that she had substantial savings and a stable, well-paying job. In reality, she was deeply in debt and had been fired from her last 2 jobs for misconduct, specifically for misusing company funds. The wedding planning had brought everything to light. Tom discovered that Kelly had opened several credit cards in his name without his knowledge. She had been using these cards to fund her lavish lifestyle, racking up tens of thousands of dollars in debt. When he confronted her about it, she tried to guilt-trip him, saying she only did it because she wanted to give him the wedding he deserved. As Tom spoke, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sadness. His story aligned perfectly with the Kelly I knew, the master manipulator who always found a way to make her actions seem justified. But it also revealed a level of desperation in Kelly that I hadn't fully grasped before. Tom apologized to me, saying he now understood why I had refused to contribute to the wedding. He admitted that Kelly had told him I was just being selfish and jealous, and he had believed her. Now he saw the pattern of manipulation and lies that I had been trying to escape for years. After Tom left, I sat in the cafe for a long time, processing what I'd learned. I felt angry at Kelly for her deception but also worried about her. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and it was clear she was spiraling out of control. A few days after my meeting with Tom, all hell broke loose in the family. Kelly, unable to keep the breakup secret any longer, told our parents that Tom had left her. But her version of events was predictably very different from Tom's. According to Kelly, Tom had been controlling and abusive and had left her when she stood up to him. She claimed he had lied about her using his credit cards to turn people against her. She painted herself as the victim of a cruel man who had taken advantage of her trust and generosity. I received a flurry of calls and messages from family members, all expressing sympathy for Kelly and anger towards Tom. Some even suggested that I should reconsider helping with the wedding costs so Kelly could start over after this traumatic experience. I was torn. Part of me wanted to expose Kelly's lies and finally make our family see her true nature. I had concrete evidence now, straight from Tom, of her deception and financial misdeeds. Could be my chance to clear my name and show everyone that I hadn't been wrong about Kelly all along. But another part of me knew that confronting her would only lead to more drama and pain. Kelly had proven time and time again that she was capable of twisting any situation to her advantage. If I revealed what Tom had told me, she would likely find a way to spin it against me, perhaps accusing me of colluding with her abusive ex to slander her. In the end, I decided to stay out of it. When family members called asking about the situation, I didn't confirm or deny Kelly's story. I simply said I was sorry things didn't work out and left it at that. It wasn't the most satisfying response, but it felt like the healthiest choice for my own well-being. This situation has reinforced my decision to distance myself from family drama. I've realized that Kelly's manipulation runs deep, and it's not my responsibility to fix it or to make others see the truth. I'm focusing on my own life and happiness. Jake and I have put an offer on a house, and we're excited about this new chapter in our lives. It's a modest 3-bedroom in a quiet neighborhood, nothing fancy, but it's ours. As we've been packing up our apartment, I've come across old photos and mementos from my life with Kelly. It's been a bittersweet experience, reminding me of the good times we had amidst all the manipulation and control. I'm also considering starting therapy again to work through some of the lingering issues from my relationship with Kelly. The revelations about her lies to Tom have brought up a lot of old feelings and memories that I thought I had dealt with. It's a difficult journey, but I'm hopeful for the future. For now, I'm taking it one day at a time. I'm learning to set boundaries, not just with Kelly, but with all my relationships. It's not easy, and there are days when I second-guess my decisions, but overall, I feel like I'm on the right path. Update 3. It's been about 6 weeks since my last update, and I have some surprising news to share. Last week, I received an unexpected visitor at my workplace. It was Kelly. At first, I thought I was seeing things. Kelly had never visited me at work before, always insisting that I come to her. But there she was, standing awkwardly by the reception desk, looking nothing like her usual polished self. Kelly looked terrible, with dark circles under her eyes and a defeated expression I'd never seen on her before. Her clothes, usually impeccably styled, were wrinkled and mismatched. She asked if we could talk, and against my better judgment, I agreed to have lunch with her. We went to a small deli near my office. As we sat down with our sandwiches, I braced myself for another round of accusations or manipulation, But what happened next caught me completely off guard. Kelly broke down. Not in the theatrical, attention-seeking way I was used to, but in a raw, vulnerable manner that made me deeply uncomfortable. She confessed that her life had spiraled out of control after Tom left her. She'd lost her job and was facing eviction from her apartment. She admitted to lying about Tom being abusive and said she couldn't keep up with all the lies anymore. Between sobs, Kelly told me she'd hit rock bottom and realized she needed to change. She said she'd started seeing a therapist and was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder. She's been attending group therapy sessions and is on medication now. As she spoke, I found myself remembering moments from our childhood. Kelly comforting me after nightmares, teaching me to ride a bike, defending me from bullies at school. For the first time in years, I felt like I was seeing glimpses of that sister, not the manipulator she'd become. What surprised me most was when Kelly looked me in the eye and sincerely apologized for her behavior over the years. She acknowledged how she'd manipulated and hurt me, and said she understood why I had cut her off. She didn't ask for money or help, just for a chance to make amends. Over time, I was skeptical at first, given our history, but as we talked, I could see genuine remorse and a desire to change in Kelly's eyes. It was the first time in years that I felt like I was talking to my sister, not a stranger wearing her face. We talked for hours, going over painful memories and confronting hard truths. Kelly admitted to many things. Her jealousy of my relationship with Jake, her resentment of my career success, her desperate attempts to maintain control over my life. She also shared more about her diagnosis, helping me understand some of her behavior without excusing it. I told Kelly that while I appreciated her apology, rebuilding our relationship would take time and effort on her part. I made it clear that I wasn't ready to let her back into my life fully, but I was willing to take small steps if she continued to work on herself. Since that lunch, Kelly has respected my boundaries. She sends me short, respectful texts updating me on her therapy progress but doesn't push for more contact than I'm comfortable with. It's a small thing, but it gives me hope that maybe, just maybe, real change is possible. Last week, she sent me a photo of a painting she'd done in art therapy. It was a picture of two little girls holding hands, clearly meant to be us. The gesture touched me more than I expected. I'm still proceeding with caution, and Jake and I are maintaining firm boundaries. But for the first time in a long while, I feel cautiously optimistic about the possibility of having a healthier relationship with my sister in the future. This experience has taught me a lot about the complexity of family dynamics and the possibility of change. While I'm not forgetting the past, I'm cautiously open to the possibility of a different future. Only time will tell how things will unfold, but for now, I'm taking it one day at a time. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Cousin tried to manipulate me into inviting her to my wedding after years of her unstable behavior. Now, her family refuses to attend. I, 25F, am getting married this coming spring. I've got a cousin named Rose, also 25F, who was around a lot growing up. Her mother, my aunt, is my mother's sister, and they've always been super close. My mom adores Rose and her siblings for some reason, and we spent a lot of holidays and summers together when we were growing up. The thing is, Rose is crazy. Her brothers are fine, but Rose is crazy. Every time we were together, she would have a meltdown and throw a temper tantrum if things didn't go her way, and it never made any sense. She would throw fits if we went to the beach, but also if she didn't go to the beach. She even broke some of my stuff. She just seems like a very unstable girl. We stopped spending so much time together when Rose's dad got a job in a different state and they moved away and couldn't afford to fly back as frequently. It's been a while, and I still follow her on social media. She posts a lot about mental health stuff. She goes by a new name, has a new look, and she's even dating some guy, but I don't think it's authentic. I think she's trying to reinvent herself because she used to be such a brat and is trying to make people forget how she used to treat them. I'm pretty sure she is BPD. This Christmas was at my mom's house, and my fiancé and I figured that we would hand out the wedding invites there and not risk them getting lost in the mail. Most people at Christmas got one, but Rose naturally wasn't invited. I don't want her ruining our special day or anything. She was pretty mellow and was talking about her new job and stuff. She came up and told me that she noticed that her brothers had gotten an invite, but I had forgotten to give her one. I told her I didn't think she would want to come since when we used to get together. Nothing seemed right for her. She seemed really taken aback, apologized for how she used to act because she had a lot of stuff to deal with, and said she was sorry that I didn't think she couldn't change from when she was a kid. I held firm because this is the first time she's ever apologized to me for how she tried to ruin stuff, and I think she was just trying to manipulate me into getting her way like she always used to. Her family realized that she had never gotten an invite, and one of her brothers called and asked why his sister wasn't invited. I reiterated that I didn't feel comfortable with a mentally unstable woman at my wedding, and he got angry and said that I was stupid for being mad about something that happened so long ago and that I was being ridiculous and bigoted and said he didn't want to come either and hung up. Then Rose's mom called my mom and said that if her daughter was the only family member not invited, that she wasn't going to attend. Now my mom is upset that her sister and nibblings, her word, aren't coming and begs me to just invite Rose. But you can't fully cure mental illness, and I don't want her coming and smashing my cake or something. Look, if one day I decided to shave my head and change my name to something completely different and demand people now call me this new name, it would look like I had some sort of mental break. I don't know why people think that this is a stable thing to do. It seemed way more violent and not typical. Random things would set her off. Like once she went into her room and pulled off the heads of all her Barbies and one of mine because we were playing together earlier, and another time at her birthday, she was really happy opening presents, and then she unboxed a new dress my mom got her and started crying and wouldn't tell anyone why she didn't like it. Update 1. I am getting married in several months. Sorry if this sounds convoluted. I'm really stressed over this whole thing, and it's sometimes hard to keep my thoughts together. It's a long story. There has been some drama about me not inviting my cousin that spiraled into family drama, and now her parents and brothers are threatening to pull out if I don't invite her. I don't want my cousin there because she is mentally ill, I believe BPD. And I have had very bad experiences with her when we grew up together, and I don't believe she has truly improved the way she acts like she has. I feel like she could be a potential threat to my wedding, and I don't want all the attention to be on her having a breakdown or her trying to smash my cake or interrupt my vows. But my mother, who is very close with her mother and her, is also threatening to pull funding because I'm acting ridiculous for not inviting all of her nibblings. It's causing so much drama, and with my aunt and my mother deciding to take back the offer of money, I wouldn't be able to fully pay for the venue we already have booked. The invites were given out about a month ago, and I'm surprised and disappointed that the drama hasn't blown over since then. I got advice on Reddit before that suggested extra security to shadow my cousin specifically. It looked like that was the only way to keep this venue, so I brought it up with my fiancé, and he said he was fine with hiring someone or even having one of his relatives shadow her the entire time and make sure she didn't try anything. So I mentioned it to my mother, but she didn't like the idea. She says my cousin isn't a threat and I'm being awful towards her. I tried to explain that rationally it was the best option. My cousin is a mentally ill woman, and I doubt the venue would appreciate us inviting someone with a known history of destruction and meltdowns. This way she can have her nieces and nephews and sister at the wedding, and I can have slightly more peace of mind. I'm trying to maintain this boundary, but my mom still insists that I'm being awful for some reason. I'm just trying to maintain the peace while feeling safe at my own wedding. Edit 1. This post is getting brigade. I would like it if you would stop baselessly speculating on my cousin's sexuality and implying that I'm a bad person because of it. Edit 2. For everyone implying that my mother is fully funding my wedding, that isn't true. She is contributing a significant amount, but I did not ask her to. She offered. If I had known that the money came with strings attached, I would have chosen a cheaper venue when planning. Pulling out now would lose my deposit, which I paid for, and cause me to have to do a lot of rescheduling and replanning. I'm not going to give in and let some psycho ruin me and my fiancé's day. To those recommending I go low or no contact with my mother, that isn't an option. I love her and she loves me, and I'm not going to destroy our relationship because of some psycho. You're being entitled, rude, and manipulative. I read your post and I remember you from a previous post where you handed out invites to your wedding in front of her, which was completely uncalled for and callous of you. You're judging someone who you haven't seen for years for things they did as a child. How would you like every mistake you've made held against you? At this rate, you'll be lucky if you have any family left attending your wedding. Update 2. I appreciate all the people who gave advice on my last post, even if they were unnecessarily rude about it. The day after I made my post, Rose finally called me. She had gotten and rejected my invite. She was nasty about it, but she's always been a bit of a brat. She said she didn't care about my wedding and didn't want to be part of more stupid family drama, which I think is hypocritical because she always starts the drama. So she and her brothers and parents aren't attending, and my mom and some other guests are upset at that, but it's all manageable. I went to breakfast with my mom this morning, and we sat down and spoke about the wedding. I took advice from my last post and told her that if she continued to favor a cousin over her daughter, then I would never speak to her again and she would not be invited to the rescheduled wedding. A lot was said, but she broke down and admitted that she was bluffing and didn't actually want to ruin my big day. She was just upset with how I had acted back around the holidays and hoped that her threat would be a wake-up call. I apologized and acknowledged that I didn't realize how hurtful my actions would have been perceived. She essentially raised me by myself, and I have always tried to live by the values she instilled in me, even if they aren't always popular with others, and I told her this. So the wedding should still be on course. I still have to find the money to make up for what my aunt would have paid, but I don't think it's a lot, and my fiancé will probably be able to cover it. Thank you again for all the advice. I was set to get married today. It was great. I had everything planned out perfectly. My venue was on the pricey side, but both my mother and aunt said they would help pay for it to make my wedding perfect. I sent invites months ahead to make sure everyone had time to plan stuff if they needed to travel, and the drama started when I didn't invite my cousin. I grew up with her because our mothers are close, and she is very mentally ill and would always have meltdowns and stuff. Around last year, she had a breakdown that everyone seems to ignore now. I'm pretty sure she is BPD, and anyone who knows someone with that will tell you how unstable and unpredictable those people are. So I decided that I didn't want a severely mentally ill woman at my wedding to risk ruining it, and also we weren't that close to begin with and hadn't seen each other for years. I thought everyone would understand that, and it's not like she and I were very close to begin with. It caused a lot of drama and family fighting. My aunt said that if I didn't invite her daughter, then she wasn't going to contribute money, and my female cousin's brothers also said that they weren't coming. Then my mom got angry and said that she wasn't going to contribute money if I was going to discriminate against my female cousin. And then other relatives heard that I hadn't invited her because of her mental illness. I didn't even tell anyone it was because of that, just that we weren't close, but I guess she was telling them that I was being bigoted against her because of her illness. I settled things with my mom who agreed to pay, and I even offered my cousin an invite and apologized for excluding her when I initially sent out the invites, but she brushed me off and said she didn't want to go to my wedding. But my aunt never accepted the apology and still refused to pay. I thought that that was fine because my fiancé could make up the difference. I asked my dad if he was willing to contribute more. He divorced my mom when I was a kid and we're not super close anymore because of it, but he still offered some money. But neither of them were able to pitch in anymore, and my savings also aren't enough unless I wanted to completely wipe them out or take out a loan, and I don't think that's a very good financial choice. I want the perfect wedding, but I don't want to go into debt for it. I finally decided to fold and look for another venue, but all of the ones I wanted were booked for the rest of the year. Last month, my fiancé told me that we should postpone the wedding for a year so that we find the perfect venue that we can afford. I had to call all my friends and the family members who still wanted to go and basically tell them I was too poor to get married this year. It was humiliating. All of this is because of my cousin who got pissy that I didn't want her at my wedding, and she doesn't even want to go to the wedding anyway and did her best to turn my family against me. Update 3. Anyway, it ended up with us not having enough money for my wedding. It was too close to be able to reschedule a venue, so we decided to cut our losses and get married next year instead. We still had a 2-week Mediterranean cruise scheduled as our honeymoon, so he said we should just go on it as a normal vacation to try and unwind after the disaster of a year I've had so far. It was nice, but near the end he got more and more distant, and once we landed back home, I joked it was back to wedding planning, and he got very serious and admitted that he doesn't think planning a wedding is a very good idea. He said the family drama had made him reconsider, and he thought that the cruise would soften the blow. I was crying and said I'd cut off the shitty family members and obviously we would never see the psycho relative ever again. But he said it wasn't just that I had shitty crazy family members. It's been almost a week since he was last home. He's staying with his brother. I'm numb at this point. Everything's gone off the rails. The cruise actually made me feel worse, like he was just wanted to have fun and was using me for sex before dropping me. I hate all of this. Are you the person who didn't want to invite her supposedly mentally ill cousin whose mother was helping pay for the wedding? That was quite a saga, because if that's you, he's right. It's not that you have shitty family members, you are the shitty family member. Now on to the next story. Story 4. I laughed at my father's mistress when my aunt called her out for using depression as an excuse to ruin our family. But now I wonder if I was wrong. 2 years ago, my father left my mother to go with his mistress, whom I will call Anna. My mother never had any idea about the infidelity. Anna knew that my father was married. She even went to the house with him to take his things. One day he simply told my mother that he is no longer in love with her and wants to be happy with Anna. I was there when everything happened. Anna was depressed. She has many scars on her legs and arms. I don't go to my father's house. It makes me uncomfortable to be around them for obvious reasons. Anna is overly nice and it's really uncomfortable. A few days ago, it was my grandfather's birthday, and the whole family was together, including Anna. I have an aunt who suffers from depression and other more heavy things like schizophrenia. She has tried to hurt herself many times. At one point in the night, there were only my father, my aunt, Anna, another aunt, and I in the living room. For some reason, my aunt and Anna were talking about some serious things, and at one point Anna began to say that depression made her do many things, trying to feel fulfilled. That she could only overcome depression when she met my father and he saved her. That meeting him was the key to overcome her depression, and now she's finally happy thanks to him. I know about that because Anna often tried to bond with me by telling me how much she suffered in her life and how my father saved her. She has always justified herself that she was depressed and was in a hard place in her life before my father saved her. It always makes me feel uncomfortable, and I don't feel empathy for her, no matter how sweet she is. Talking about how many times you try to kill yourself in front of my aunt's old sister isn't something normal. Anna has always tried to paint her relationship with my father as a fairy tale that began in a different way, but that she doesn't regret anything because her world is perfect now. At that moment, my aunt said something like, I tried to save myself by going to a psychologist, not by jumping on the dick of a married man, and then she began to say that depression made her want to jump off a bridge, but not ruin a family. I just laughed. It was funny. My aunt may have her mind elsewhere all day, but it was crazy to see her make such a sly comment. But when my father was taking me home, Anna was crying, and he scolded me for laughing at what my aunt said, saying that no one knows everything that Anna suffered. I know she always talks about that. I didn't apologize, but now I think, was I really wrong to laugh? From my point of view, my aunt was right. Update 1. Hello. Some things happened over the weekend. My aunt came home. I live with my mother, and told my mom what happened. My sister is an 8-year-old girl, and she really hates Anna. Anna tried to get along with my sister and told her about the time she wanted to commit suicide and how my dad saved her. After that, my sister came home asking my mother if she had ever thought about committing suicide. That's not a question an 8-year-old girl should ask, and my sister even asked me questions about suicide. After that, I don't really know what else exactly Anna said to her, but it definitely affected her as a little girl. It's not even something you should talk about with a girl of that age. My mother was furious, and since that day she forbids my father to have my younger sister near Anna as she considers her a dangerous and unstable person around children. Since that day, things have been really tense between my father and my mother. My little sister doesn't want to visit our father, so she is fine with us. My aunt told my mother that Anna talked about it again, but this time in front of me. Apparently, my father and Anna were totally forbidden to talk about these things in front of me, too. I'm not a little kid, but apparently that was the arrangement my mother made with my father when she set boundaries for them. My aunt told her what happened that day, and I confessed to my mother that Anna and my father talk a lot about those suicide attempts in front of me, which is something I should have talked about before, but at that moment I didn't want problems and decided to just ignore them. I told my mom that for that reason I am not going to my father's house anymore, and my mother got very upset with him. The next day she went to talk to my father. I don't know what they talked about. She just came back saying that Anna can't get close to us anymore. She told me that she can't forbid me from being near my father and that's my decision. But Anna is extremely forbidden to set foot in the same place where I and my sister are. My paternal grandparents agreed, and my aunts too. They knew about the situation with my younger sister. I haven't spoken to my father, but my cousin told me that my father argued with my grandfather. He often says that Anna is a good person and we don't understand the pain she suffered, so I guess he's upset with all of us now for our great lack of empathy, as he always says. I don't know. At least now I won't see them for a while. It was a boring update, but that's what happened. Haha. And for my father is only 3 years older than Anna. She is not much younger than him or anything like that. From what Anna told me, she always tells it they met at work. She called my father every time she tried to commit suicide, and so he began to help her. Anna used to go to the psychologist but said that she decided to leave it because that did not help her. Then she met my father and well, according to her, he saved her. It is disturbing to hear her talk about how she always sent messages to my father since he was her only support, her words, and he ran and left everything at home to go with her every time she was feeling bad. A sociopath in my books. A good person doesn't talk about suicide with an 8-year-old whose brain hasn't developed fully to understand its implications, or a good person doesn't have sex with a man who is in a committed relationship. Update 2. Hi. I wasn't planning to make another update, but we've had a lot of problems with Anna. Too many. And I think now even my father has realized that she's crazy. I have stopped going to see my father, and my father's parents stopped allowing him to go with Anna to their house since I am there a lot, and my mother does not allow her to come near me or my sister. Anna began to have the strange behavior of starting to send me texts. First, she apologized to me but insisted that my father misses me and my sister. I replied to her that my mother does not allow us to talk to her, and she said that she is my father's partner, so we have to get used to her being around. She started to talk badly about my mother, saying that I'm too young to realize it, but my mother is manipulating us and wrong because she's not allowing us to be a family. I'm young, but I'm not dumb. I didn't answer her again and showed the messages to my mother, who spoke to my father again. My father knew nothing about this and apparently had an argument with Anna about this. Since now, my mother is planning to take away his last name from our name to end with this show and protect us. I don't understand too much about this, but in my country you can go to court and take out your father's surname, making him have no right over you anymore. I honestly believe that neither my sister nor I would have any problem with this, but I think my mother just said that to scare him. This is something I heard from my aunt, and I don't know how much of this is real, but my father has been staying at my grandparents' house. One of those nights, Anna went to knock on the door looking for him just to argue. She and my father began to argue. Anna yelled at my dad that he couldn't leave her like that, but nothing else happened because my grandfather kicked her out. My aunt also told me that my father told her that Anna sends him messages like, "If you leave me, I will kill myself. You can't leave me." So my father is afraid of leaving her and afraid of her. Less than 2 days ago, I found out that my father had to leave work quickly because she sent him goodbye messages. Nothing happened to her. She just cut her arms as always. My aunt said that this is something that Anna has always done, even when the affair started. She sent him messages saying that she was about to commit suicide so that my father would go to her. This is something that Anna also told me, but in a more romantic way. It always scared me. I have no contact with my father and I avoid him when he's at Grandpa's house. But as far as my aunt has told me, he doesn't know what to do since he misses us but is afraid to leave her and that she will kill herself. I feel bad for thinking this, but I'm really relieved to be hearing all this from afar. I'm so thankful that my mom forbade us to see her before all this happens, and honestly, this is his karma, so I'm not going to get into this. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My wife cheated as compensation for giving birth to our child. So I found condoms in her bag and exposed her multiple hookups to win full custody of our baby. I, 32M, married my wife, Janet, 26F, 3 years ago. We have a 7-month-old daughter. A couple of days back, I found something in her bag which blew my mind. It was a pack of condoms. I'm not the kind of guy who checks his wife's bag, but this time it was urgent. My wife was in the shower, and I needed a diaper to change my baby. I had put the baby at the changing table, and then I realized we had run short of one. I remember my wife keeps a few diapers in her bag when she takes the baby for a walk. Her bag was lying near the baby counter, easier for me to grab it. I opened it and found 2 diapers inside it. While pulling it out, Something came out of the bag and fell on the floor. A pack of condoms. It was a pack of 3. The packet was open and it had just 1 left. I checked the bag if the remaining 2 had fallen inside, but it was not there, meaning that 2 were already used. My baby was crying profusely, so I kept the condom inside my pocket and changed my baby. When she came out of the shower, I put the baby in the crib and pulled out the condom from my pocket and asked Janet about this. The actor in her came out, and she outrightly denied it. She said it wasn't hers. She tried to gaslight the situation and pin it on me. I was shocked at how she could lie so smoothly. I said I found it in her bag. She replied, "But you just now pulled it from your pocket, right?" I flipped out at her because she was not ready to accept it was hers. She then burst out in laughter and said, "Oh, poor you. Look at your puppy face. I was messing up with you. Yeah, the condom is mine. I bought it for us." She winked as she said this. It was evident that she was lying because we don't use protection. She's breastfeeding, and her cycle is yet to be back, so we don't use protection now. She dismissed me and said her cycle is back to normal, so we might need protection if we don't want to have back-to-back kids. I asked her what happened to the 2 of them. There's just 1 inside the packet. It should have been 3. She left it and said it was a funny story. Yesterday she brought it and then she went out with friends. A guy was hitting on her friend, Kyle. Things got heated up between them and they went to see a corner. But they didn't have a condom, so she lent 2 units to them. I gave her a look of disbelief. I said, "Do you want me to believe this?" She said yes because that's the only truth. She said, "I can call Kyle and ask for myself." I didn't call her because if Janet is lying, then Kyle is obviously on board with her and she's going to lie too, so what's the point? I didn't call her, but I told Janet that I'm not buying her rat ass, so she needs to come clean to whatever she has been up to. She's weeping that I don't understand her, that she has just delivered a baby and is going through postpartum depression, and amidst this I was accusing her of cheating. I have not tried to make things up with her. I have left it that way, but she has made the environment murky. She is just curling up inside the bed in the dark room. She is refusing to switch on the lights, saying she doesn't like the brightness. She is not eating at all. I'm not sure how she is when I'm not home, but this is what she has been doing after the confrontation. I am the one who usually apologizes right after our fights because, hardly any woman breaks the ice and says sorry first. However, this time I just don't feel like apologizing at all. I don't think I have done anything wrong by asking her up front about the condoms. Do you guys think I could have done anything differently? Update 1. Thank you for engaging in my post. You guys were right in saying that she flashed the red flag right across my face. Yes, she did, and I didn't let it slide. Some of you asked for more information about Janet to comment on this situation. Well, Janet and I have known each other for over 6 years. We met at a friend's party. She was the most gorgeous woman out there. We spent the evening together talking, dancing, and having fun, but I forgot to ask for her number. I'm not a party person, but it was my friend's promotion party, and he insisted I attend. I asked my friend about Janet, and he said he didn't know her either. She was his colleague's friend. I requested my friend to ask his colleagues for Janet's number. He was reluctant to do so because my friend was married, and he didn't want his colleagues to think that he was hitting on Janet. After a lot of convincing, he got her number. I kept it for a week before texting her. I didn't know how she would take this to be. I didn't want to come across as desperate or cheap. I mean, she was gorgeous, and I'm sure there were many men in the party who wanted her number. Nonetheless, I mustered the courage and messaged her. Luckily, she replied that she regretted not asking for my number. From there on, we hit it off. She was working a part-time job. She said she didn't like a full-time job because it involves a lot of commitment, and she likes to live freely on her terms. Could have been a red flag, but I didn't think it in that way. I was immersed deeply in my work, and I was not liking it that way. I wanted to be free like her, so it kind of clicked for me. After dating for 2 years, I proposed to her, and we got married in a closed ceremony with friends and family. Janet didn't want to waste money on a grand wedding. She wanted to use that money for vacation instead. After the wedding, we went on a 15-day trip to Europe. 1.5 years after the marriage, Janet got pregnant. She freaked out because we didn't plan it that way. We wanted to travel the world together and do a bunch of stuff before having a baby. She wanted to get rid of it. I was not happy with her decision. I love kids, and I wanted one, but since she had different plans, I never forced her into pregnancy. But when she got pregnant unexpectedly, I tried to convince her to keep the baby. She was in two minds, but ultimately she kept it. Pregnancy journey is anyways tough and cranky for women, and since I was the one who convinced her into this, I had to face the brunt of it. I did everything to keep her happy. Thankfully, her pregnancy was without any complications. Yet she threw tantrums, and I happily took it because, it was her time. After the baby came, she became worse. I thought it was because of the lack of sleep and tiredness nursing the baby. She got so depressed that she was caged now and that she could not have her former freedom. I took her for therapy, and the doctor said it was postpartum depression, and it was natural for all women. Post-delivery, I tried everything to give her the freedom she needed. I hired a full-time nanny so that she could have free time to herself. Our daughter was 2 months old, and since then Janet has resumed her life of partying and going out with her friends as she used to do it earlier. I never stopped her because the doctor said a happy mom would nurture a happy baby. 7 months later, here we are. I found a condom inside her bag, and she is throwing her best friend under the bus to save her pretty ass. Coming to the updates, as I mentioned earlier, Janet was trying to gaslight the situation, but I didn't give in. I told her if she thinks she would put up an act and would get away with her actions, then she's wrong. I'm not going to let go of this until she tells me the truth because what she had earlier said is pure BS. Since she was not opening up, I started digging out myself. I wanted to check her phone, but she's so guarded about it that I could never access it. Even when she would sleep, she would keep it next to her or under her pillow. She had always been like that with her phone, so I never questioned her directly. Asking her to show her phone was also not an option. She would again make a hue and cry about it that I was doubting her and blah blah. I don't know how else to get the evidence because this woman has no conscience, and she's not going to confess. Any suggestion is greatly welcomed. Update 2. Thanks for the advice. As most of you suggested, I was about to hire a PI on her, but before that, I found a way myself. One Sunday, I just thought of stalking her social media account. I couldn't find anything from a public view, but her picture with her best friend, Kyle, caught my eye. I stalked Kyle's profile and got to know she was married and had a toddler. The other day, Janet said that Kyle was making out with a guy at the bar, and she needed the condom. I was like, wait a minute, does her husband know about all this? I went to Janet and said, hey, I'm sorry that I doubted you for the condom thing. I trust you. If you said it was Kyle, it should be her. She smiled at me. I asked her if Kyle does this always. She said yes and started listing down some of the incidents where Kyle made moves at the men in the bar. I don't know how true it was or she was just making it up to cover for herself. After listening to her supposedly funny incidents about Kyle, I dropped the bombshell. I said, well, that's funny. By the way, isn't Kyle married and has a toddler? Are you guys supporting her in her cheating? Does her husband know about all this? She froze like an iceberg and then started ranting. No. That's not what I meant. It's just healthy flirting and nothing else. I intervened, but you just shared so many stories of her picking men from the bar. And why would she need a condom for healthy flirting? She said, oh, did I say Kyle? My bad. Stupid pregnancy brain. I meant Kiara, my single friend. She's the one who's goofing around. Kyle is a sober one. She doesn't do all this stuff. I was in awe how swiftly this woman can make stories. I laughed and said, I caught you. You don't have to save Kyle's ass. Are you worried that I would tell Kyle's husband about her truth? She sighed, yes, please don't do that. Her marriage would be ruined. They have a baby. Please, she loves her husband dearly. It was just meaningless sex and nothing more. I looked at her with a smile. I knew she was speaking for herself and not Kyle. Everything she told about Kyle was actually Janet's, but she won't confess so easily. I told her that I was not feeling good about Kyle cheating on her husband, so I'm going to tell her husband everything. Janet screamed at me that why was I acting like a saint, who am I to do the moral policing here, and blah blah blah. I said, I'm not listening to anything. I'm going to tell Kyle's husband about everything. She mellowed down and started sobbing. I got the vibe that she was about to confess, but I was not ready for it yet. I stormed inside my room and locked it. I didn't want her to get away with her infidelity by just confessing. I wanted my revenge. This cheating is not only going to cost her the marriage but also her friendship. I texted Kyle on Instagram. I told her that Janet had told me about her dirty little secret. She was aghast. I sent her the recordings where Janet was ranting stories about Kyle's affair. Kyle left me on scene, but I heard Janet's phone ringing a few moments later. Janet was banging at the door, crying and yelling, "Why are you doing this to me? Open the door. Why are you destroying everything? Why can't you trust me?" Probably she was still on call with Kyle because she yelled, "He's not opening the door. God knows what he is up to." Then Kyle called me. She asked me to listen to Janet. I said I was not going to listen to anyone, and the next thing I'm going to do is send the recording to her husband. She freaked out. She pleaded that I don't do anything before listening to Janet. I said I'm going to call her husband, and then we both can listen to all the stories together. She blurted out that whatever Janet said was not Kyle's story, but Janet and she had been cheating on me for over 4 months. I asked her why did she not stop her friend. Kyle said she and the other girls did try to knock sense to her, but Janet would argue that she gave me a beautiful baby, so she deserved this little pleasure. Fair enough. I was convinced that Kyle was speaking the truth. My gut feeling hinted at this truth long before, but I wanted to cut all the support system for Janet. I asked Kyle to come over along with her husband. I don't know if I went too far, but I wanted Kyle's husband to know what a piece of shit is Janet and that he should keep Kyle away from her. Kyle agreed to come, but she requested me not to show the recordings to her husband because Janet was so good at her storytelling that anyone would believe it to be true. She didn't want her husband to doubt her unnecessarily. I said, "Done." Kyle was at my house within an hour. I was locked inside my room until she arrived. The moment she came, I heard Janet shouting at her, "Why are you here? I told you I'll manage now. Go away. I'm going to deal with this." I came out while Kyle was yelling at Janet for falsely framing her. It was just too much chaos with both of them screaming at each other. Kyle's husband intervened and asked Janet to tell her side of the story. Kyle gave Janet the look of, "Don't dare to lie." Janet sobbed and confessed everything. She accepted that whatever incident she told me that day was not about Kyle. It was all hers. She has been picking up men from the bar and sleeping with them. Kyle's husband was shocked that Jay was such an a-hole. She was cheating and then making her friend the scapegoat to get away with her cheating. He yelled at Kyle, "This is the kind of friend you brood." She was about to wreck our marriage. After Janet was done with the confession, Kyle and her husband stood up to leave, and Kyle said, "Don't you ever contact me. I love my husband and my family. You are not worth losing them." Janet held Kyle's hands and started crying, but she shrugged her off and went away. After they left, Janet looked at me and said, "Are you happy now? What did you get by humiliating me in front of my friend and her husband? Is this what you wanted?" I glared at her and said, "Your woman card is not going to work anymore. You have used all your cards. Pregnancy, postpartum, everything. Now I'm going to show you the consequences of your actions. The humiliation you are talking about is just halfway through it. You have more to come. This is not over. You said you deserve to cheat on me because you gave me a baby, right? I'm going to give you what you deserve. Just wait." I took my stuff and went to the other room. I called up my lawyer and discussed my case. I told him to dig out any loopholes in the law and get me full custody of my daughter. He asked me to get all the evidence of Janet's negligence towards the baby, like her drinking and partying habits and her hookups. He said he would make a case around child safety, that it was not safe for a child to live with a mother who brings new men to the house every day. I don't know how promising it is, but I'm definitely up for any fight to a full custody of my little girl. I'm going to protect her from her liar and cheat mother. I'll update it when all of this is over. Update 3. Sorry, I had to delete my last update. I had revealed my lawyer's plan about ripping off the custody from Janet. I shouldn't have done that. The day after posting the update, when I met my lawyer, he asked me not to discuss the case with anyone. I told him that I posted on this subreddit anonymously. He asked me to delete it ASAP. Now that everything is over, I have reposted it. It is available on my profile page. I'm still not allowed to get into the nitty-gritty of the law, but here's the other details. After the confrontation, I slept in the guest bedroom. I tried to have a minimal encounter with Janet. She would try to come close to me and make me breakfast and dinner, but I shrugged her off. She even made a sorry cake and bought flowers and cards. She thought I would be over it once my anger subsided. She had no clue what was coming on her way. Almost a month later, my lawyer came down to my place with the divorce papers. Janet freaked out. She was terrified when she was served. She looked at me helplessly, like, "What are you doing? How could you do this to me?" After the attorney left, I asked her to pack the stuff and leave. She cried and pleaded to give a chance to our marriage for the sake of our baby. She tried to hug me, but I pushed her away. She said she had nowhere to go. I chuckled, "Not my problem anymore. I gave you everything you wanted. Now I'm going to give you what you deserve, and you deserve to be on the streets." She threatened to take away the last penny I had. I said, "Sure. Good luck hiring a lawyer. The good ones don't come for free unless you want to open your legs to hire them." She went towards my daughter's nursery, but I blocked her. "No, you're not getting her. She's not living on the streets with you." She broke down that I was ripping her off our daughter. I said, "You were not interested in being a mother, did you? I'm freeing you from all the responsibilities. You can now live the life you wanted." She packed her stuff and left. My lawyer built a strong case to get full custody, like hiring a full-time nanny and taking a work-from-home job, etc. But it turned out that Janet was indeed not so keen on keeping the baby. She didn't have a house nor a job, so she didn't fight for custody at all. However, she went bonkers to claim the alimony. I had to pay a certain amount. Can't disclose, sorry, to get rid of her, but it was way too low than what she was demanding, and it was completely worth it to get rid of that a-hole out of my life. Kyle and her husband visited me one day to check on the baby. Kyle apologized to me for not informing me about Janet's hookups. She said she tried to stop Janet from infidelity, but she didn't listen. She was sorry for the baby. Kyle said she was glad I took full custody because Janet was not so involved with the baby, and she would not be able to raise the baby properly like I was doing. Kyle told me that Janet would always crib about how fussy and cranky the baby was and so on. She was overplaying her postpartum thing. Kyle's husband informed me that Janet had reached out to them for help, but he had chased her out. Since then, Janet has been shuffling from one friend's couch to another, and her drinking habit has also hit the roof. I said I don't care what she does with her life now. They offered a helping hand with babysitting. I thanked them for their kind gesture, but I don't think I would need them. My parents have moved in with me to help me with the baby. We also have a full-time nanny, so I think the baby is going to be fine. I might let her meet her mother someday, but not now. She's just happy and safe with her dad now. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My wife of 6 years got me drunk to have sex with a stranger, and she did this because she was cheating on me with a stranger. So I divorced her. I am 35, have been married to my wife, Carol F. 33, for about 6 years now. We don't have any kids, as Carol isn't ready for them yet. I've brought up the topic of children a few times over the years, but she always said she wanted to focus on her career first. I respected her decision, even though I've always dreamed of being a father. Carol and I met during our sophomore year in college. We were both part of a study group for our advanced economics class. I remember the first time I saw her walk into the library, her arms full of books and a determined look on her face. She had this air of confidence about her that immediately caught my attention. During our study sessions, I was constantly amazed by Carol's intelligence and wit. She had this unique way of breaking down complex economic theories that made them easy for everyone to understand. I found myself looking forward to our study group meetings more and more, not for the economics, but for the chance to spend time with her. It wasn't until our senior year that I finally worked up the courage to ask her out. We had our first date at a small Italian restaurant just off campus. I was so nervous I spilled my water all over the table, but Carol just laughed it off and helped me clean up. That's when I knew she was special. After graduation, we both landed jobs in the city. Carol started as a junior marketing executive at a tech startup, while I began my career as a software engineer at a large corporation. We got married 2 years later in a small ceremony surrounded by our closest friends and family. Our relationship has always been solid. We communicate well, support each other's careers, and enjoy spending time together. Over the years, Carol has climbed the corporate ladder and is now a senior marketing executive at a major tech company. I'm still in software engineering, having moved to a more challenging role at a different firm a few years ago. One of the things I love about Carol is how understanding she is. She knows I need my space sometimes, so she's always been okay with me going out with my friends on weekends. I have this group of guys I've known since high school: Jake, Tom, and Matt. Every Saturday we meet up at our local bar, the Rusty Nail, to catch up over a few drinks. The Rusty Nail has been our go-to spot for years. It's this cozy little place with dark wood paneling and old rock posters on the walls. The owner, Joe, knows us all by name and always has our usual drinks ready when we arrive. It's the kind of place where everyone feels like family. Last Saturday started like any other. I met the guys at the bar around 8 p.m. Jake was telling us about his latest adventure in online dating. Tom was complaining about his new boss, and Matt was showing off pictures of his new puppy. We were having a great time sharing stories and laughing. A few hours in, this guy I'd never seen before came up to our table. He introduced himself as Mike and asked if he could join us. We were all in a good mood, so we welcomed him. Mike seemed like a cool guy. He was funny and had some interesting stories about his job as a travel photographer. As the night went on, he offered to buy a round for everyone. I remember thinking how nice that was for a stranger to do. After that, things get fuzzy. I vaguely recall stumbling out of the bar, but I have no idea how I got home. The next thing I knew, I was waking up in a strange bed in a room I didn't recognize. My head was pounding, and I felt disoriented. As I slowly became more aware, I realized there was someone else in the bed. It was a woman I'd never seen before. She was still asleep, her long blonde hair spread across the pillow. I felt a wave of panic wash over me as I realized what must have happened. I quickly got out of bed, trying not to wake her. My clothes were scattered on the floor, and I hastily put them on. The woman stirred and opened her eyes. She looked as confused as I felt. I apologized profusely, telling her I was married and that this was a huge mistake. She seemed understanding, if a bit hurt. She told me her name was Allison and that we'd met at the bar last night. Apparently, I'd been extremely drunk, and she'd offered to let me crash at her place since I couldn't remember where I lived. With shaking hands, I checked my phone. My heart sank when I saw the screen. 37 missed calls from Carol, 15 from Jake, and numerous text messages asking where I was. It was already 10 a.m. I rushed out of Allison's apartment, barely remembering to grab my wallet and keys. I called an Uber and headed home, my mind racing with how I was going to explain this to Carol. I'd never cheated before, never even thought about it. I loved my wife and couldn't believe I'd done something so stupid. As the Uber drove through the city, memories of my relationship with Carol flashed through my mind. Our first date, the night I proposed on the beach under a full moon, our wedding day. How could I have risked all of that for one drunken night? When I got home, Carol was a mess. She'd been up all night, worried sick. She'd called the hospital and even the police. As soon as she saw me, she burst into tears, alternating between relief that I was okay and anger that I disappeared. I knew I had to tell her the truth. I sat her down on our living room couch, the same couch where we'd spent countless nights cuddling and watching movies. I confessed everything, or at least what I could remember. I told her about waking up in a stranger's bed, about how I had no memory of how I got there or what happened. I apologized over and over, telling her how much I love her and how this was the biggest mistake of my life. To my surprise, Carol's anger seemed to deflate as I spoke. She was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then she asked me a lot of questions about the night, most of which I couldn't answer because of my memory loss. Finally, she said she believed it was a one-time mistake and that she forgave me. I was shocked. I had expected her to be furious, to kick me out, maybe even ask for a divorce. Instead, she was being incredibly understanding. She said our marriage was stronger than one drunken mistake and that we'd work through this together. Over the next few days, I felt incredibly guilty and couldn't understand why Carol was being so forgiving. I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop, for her to change her mind and leave me, but she didn't. She was supportive and kind, telling me we'd get past this. I decided I needed to do something to show Carol how much she meant to me. I planned a surprise for her, hoping to start making amends for my horrible mistake. I took off work early on Wednesday, picked up a bouquet of her favorite flowers, pink peonies, and ordered takeout from the Italian restaurant where we had our first date. I got home around 4 p.m., expecting Carol to still be at work, but as I approached our front door, I heard noises coming from inside. Thinking Carol might have come home early too, I quietly opened the door, wanting to surprise her. What I saw next will be forever burned into my memory. Carol was on our living room couch with another man. They were so engrossed in what they were doing that they didn't even notice me come in. I stood there frozen. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. My wife, the woman I loved more than anything in the world, was cheating on me, in our home, on the couch we'd picked out together when we first moved in. I don't know how long I stood there, but eventually, I snapped out of my shock and quietly backed out of the house. I got in my car and just drove, no destination in mind. My mind was racing, trying to make sense of what I just witnessed. I ended up at a park across town. It was the same park where Carol and I used to have picnics when we were first dating. I sat on a bench, staring at nothing for hours. As the initial shock wore off, I started to feel angry, not just at Carol, but at myself too. How could I have been so blind? How long had this been going on? I knew I needed to confront Carol, but I wasn't ready yet. I needed time to think, to plan what I was going to say, so I checked into a hotel for the night. I turned off my phone, not wanting to deal with any calls or messages from Carol. The next morning, I went back to our house, steeling myself for the confrontation. Carol was there looking worried. She asked where I'd been, saying she'd been calling me all night. The irony of the situation wasn't lost on me. I told her what I'd seen. Her face went pale, and she started crying, begging me to let her explain, but I didn't want to hear it. I packed a bag and left, telling her I needed some time to think. I'm writing this from my friend Jake's spare room. I don't know what to do next. My whole world has been turned upside down. I thought Carol and I had a good marriage. I thought she was the one person I could always trust. Now I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm not sure what my next steps should be. Should I try to work things out with Carol? Should I just file for divorce? And how do I even begin to trust anyone again after this? Any advice would be appreciated. Date 1. It's been a week since my last post, and a lot has happened. First, I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It really helped me get through some dark days. After spending a few days at Jake's place, I decided I needed to talk to Carol and get some answers. I texted her and asked her to meet me at a neutral location, a coffee shop we used to frequent. It was a small, cozy place where we'd spent many Sunday mornings during the early years of our relationship, sipping lattes and planning our future together. Now it felt like a remnant of a life that no longer existed. When I saw Carol, she looked terrible. Her eyes were red and puffy. Part of me felt bad for her, but then I remembered what she'd done. We sat down at a table in the corner, away from the other patrons. The cheerful chatter and the smell of fresh coffee felt surreal given the gravity of our conversation. I asked her to explain herself. What she told me left me speechless. According to Carol, she'd been having an affair for the past 6 months. The man I saw her with was named Mike, the same Mike who had bought our group drinks at the bar that fateful night. Carol confessed that she and Mike had planned the whole thing. They knew I always went to the Rusty Nail on Saturdays, so they decided to use that to their advantage. Mike introduced himself to our group and then spiked my drink when I wasn't looking. Their plan was for me to cheat so that when Carol's affair eventually came to light, she could use my infidelity as leverage. As Carol spoke, memories of that night came flooding back. I remembered Mike's friendly demeanor, how he'd seemed so interested in our conversation, how he'd insisted on buying that round of drinks. It all made sense now in the most horrifying way possible. I asked her why she didn't just ask for a divorce if she was unhappy. She said she was afraid of losing her comfortable lifestyle. She knew that if she cheated and I found out, I might leave her with nothing, but if she had evidence of me cheating too, she thought she could negotiate a better settlement. I felt sick to my stomach. The woman sitting across from me was a stranger. This wasn't the Carol I fell in love with. The Carol who'd stood beside me at the altar and promised to love and cherish me. This was someone calculating and cruel. Someone who'd manipulated me in the worst possible way. I got up and left without another word, ignoring Carol's pleas for me to stay and talk more. I walked aimlessly through the city streets, my mind reeling from what I'd just learned. How could someone I'd loved for so long betray me so completely? The next day, I went back to the Rusty Nail. I needed to confirm Carol's story. I talked to the owner, Joe, who I've known for years. Joe's more than just a bartender to us regulars. He's a friend, someone who celebrated our successes and commiserated with our failures over countless beers. I explained the situation to Joe, and he was horrified. He immediately agreed to help and led me to the back room where they keep the security footage. We spent hours going through the tapes from that night. Sure enough, we found clear evidence of Mike slipping something into my drink. We also saw Carol there, watching from a distance as Mike chatted with our group. The footage showed me becoming visibly intoxicated very quickly after drinking the spiked drink. It also captured Mike helping me out of the bar with Carol following at a distance. Watching it all unfold on the grainy security footage felt surreal, like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. I asked Joe for a copy of the footage, which he provided. As I was leaving, Joe put a hand on my shoulder and told me how sorry he was. He said the Rusty Nail would always be a safe place for me if I needed it. His kindness nearly broke me, and I had to hurry out before I lost my composure. Over the next few days, I did a lot of thinking. I walked through the park where Carol and I used to have picnics, drove past the restaurant where we had our first date, sat on the beach where I'd proposed. Each place held memories that now felt tainted. I realized that I couldn't stay married to someone who would go to such lengths to deceive me. Carol had not only cheated but had also put my health at risk by having me drugged. I couldn't forgive that level of betrayal. I contacted a lawyer and filed for divorce. When I told Carol, she broke down crying, begging me to reconsider. She said she loved me and that we could work things out, but I knew that the trust between us was irreparably broken. The Carol I loved was gone, if she had ever really existed at all. My lawyer advised me to keep the video evidence to myself for now. He said it could be useful if Carol tried to contest the divorce or ask for alimony. As for Mike, I decided not to confront him. My lawyer advised against it, saying it could potentially complicate the divorce proceedings, but I did file a police report about the drugging incident. The police are investigating, but they said it might be hard to prove anything after so much time has passed. I'm still staying at Jake's place. I can't bear to go back to the house Carol and I shared. Too many memories, too much pain. Jake has been an incredible friend through all of this. He's let me crash on his couch, listened to me vent, and even helped me start looking for a new apartment. I'm taking things one day at a time. Some days are better than others. I still have moments where I miss the life I thought I had with Carol, but then I remind myself of what she did, and I know I'm making the right decision. I'm focusing on myself now. I've started seeing a therapist to help me process everything. I'm throwing myself into my work and trying to reconnect with old friends I'd lost touch with over the years. I know I have a long road ahead of me. Divorce is never easy, and the betrayal I experienced has left deep scars. But I'm determined to come out of this stronger. I deserve better than what Carol did to me, and I'm going to make sure I find it. Thank you all again for your support. I'll update again when there are new developments. Update 2. It's been about a month since my last update, and I wanted to share some developments in my situation. The divorce proceedings are underway. Carol initially tried to contest it, claiming that my one-night stand was grounds for her to receive alimony. That's when my lawyer presented the video evidence of her and Mike's plot. Carol's face went pale when she realized we had proof of what she'd done. I'll never forget the look on her face in that moment. It was a mixture of shock, fear, and maybe even a bit of shame. For a brief second, I saw a flicker of the Carol I used to know, the one who would feel guilty about telling even the smallest lie. But that Carol disappeared as quickly as she had appeared, replaced by the calculating woman I'd come to know over the past month. After that, Carol became much more cooperative in the divorce proceedings. She agreed to an equitable split of our assets and didn't push for alimony. I think she realized how badly things could go for her if the full story came out. As we went through the process of dividing our life together, I was hit with waves of nostalgia and sadness. Deciding who would keep which books, which pieces of furniture, which photos, it felt like dismantling the life we'd built together piece by piece. There was the coffee table we'd bought on our first anniversary, the set of wine glasses we'd received as a wedding gift, the painting we'd picked up on our trip to Paris. Each item held a memory, and letting go of them felt like letting go of a part of myself. As for Mike, the police investigation is ongoing. They're taking the drugging incident seriously, especially since we have video evidence. Mike could be facing some serious charges. Part of me feels satisfied that he might face consequences for his actions, but another part just feels tired of the whole situation. I've moved out of Jake's place and into my own apartment. It's small, but it's mine, and it's a fresh start. The first night I spent there was tough. The silence was deafening, and the empty spaces where our shared belongings used to be seemed to mock me. But as the days passed, I started to make the place my own. I bought new furniture, hung up some art I've always liked but Carol wasn't fond of, and even got a small plant to take care of. I'm slowly rebuilding my life, piece by piece. I've been going to the gym regularly, which has been great for managing stress and helping me sleep better. The physical exertion helps clear my mind, and I found that the endorphin rush after a good workout does wonders for my mood. Work has been a good distraction. I've thrown myself into a new project, which has been keeping me busy and focused. It's a challenging assignment, developing a new software platform for a major client. The complexity of the work requires all my attention, leaving little room for dwelling on my personal problems during the day. My boss has been understanding about the whole situation and has given me some flexibility with my hours when I need it for lawyer meetings or therapy appointments. His support has been invaluable, and it's made me realize how important it is to have a good work environment. Speaking of therapy, it's been really helpful. My therapist, Dr. Anderson, has been working with me on processing my feelings of betrayal and anger. She's teaching me techniques to manage my emotions and helping me understand that what happened wasn't my fault. We're also working on rebuilding my self-esteem and learning to trust again, which is probably the hardest part of all this. I've also started reconnecting with old friends and making new ones. I joined a local hiking group, which has been great for getting me out of the house on weekends. Last Saturday, we hiked up to Eagle Peak. The view from the top was breathtaking, and for a moment, standing there with my new friends, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't experienced in a long time. It's nice to be around people who don't know my whole story, who just see me as me, not as the guy whose wife cheated on him. In the hiking group, I'm just another guy who enjoys the outdoors. It's refreshing, and it's helping me rediscover parts of myself that I'd forgotten about during my marriage. There are still tough days, of course. Sometimes I'll see something that reminds me of Carol, or I'll have a dream about our life together, and it hits me all over again. Last week, I found an old photo of us from our honeymoon tucked away in a book. Seeing our smiling faces, so full of hope and love, brought back a flood of emotions. But these moments are becoming less frequent and less intense. I'm starting to look towards the future now, for the first time in a long time. I'm excited about what might come next. Maybe I'll take that trip to Japan I've always wanted to do. Carol was never interested in going, always preferring beach vacations. But now I can plan the trip I've always dreamed of. I've started learning some basic Japanese phrases and researching the best times to see the cherry blossoms. I'm also thinking about picking up some old hobbies I'd let fall by the wayside during my marriage. I used to love playing the guitar, and I'm considering taking lessons again. And who knows, maybe I'll finally write that novel I've been thinking about for years. I have an idea for a story that's been rattling around in my head for a while now. The future is wide open, and while that's scary sometimes, it's also exhilarating. I'm learning to embrace the uncertainty and see it as an opportunity rather than a threat. To everyone who's been following my story and offering support, thank you. Your kind words and advice have meant more to me than you could know. If there's one thing I've learned from all this, it's the importance of having good people in your life. I'm grateful for all of you. I think this will be my last update for a while. I'm ready to close this chapter of my life and start writing a new one. There's still a long road ahead, and I know there will be more challenges to face. but for the first time in months, I'm feeling hopeful about what lies ahead. Life has a way of surprising us. Both with its challenges and its opportunities, I'm looking forward to seeing what surprises are in store for me next. Wish me luck. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Found condoms in my wife's car and discovered she was sleeping with our daughter's teacher for better grades. So I divorced her and won full custody. Hello everyone. For the sake of anonymity, I'll be using fake names. Laura and I met after I graduated from college. She was almost rounding up with college then, and though we didn't start dating immediately, we knew each other for at least 3 years before I asked her to be my girlfriend. Our relationship was beautiful, and we matched perfectly with each other. We dated for 3 years before we got married, and for the first 2 years of our marriage, Laura could not conceive. We tried everything possible, did all the tests, and the results showed we were both okay. But no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't make a baby. Not like I wasn't bothered about it. I was, but the person that was most affected was Laura. She loved children, and even while we were dating, she always talked about how we'd start making children once we got married. So it was heartbreaking for her to find out she could not conceive. To make things worse, we were lucky to get pregnant once, and in less than 2 months, she miscarried. This upset Laura and affected many things about her, including her enthusiasm toward life and the things she loved. It got so bad that she would start crying if she saw baby ads or pictures on Facebook. But luckily for us, towards the 3rd year of our marriage, Laura conceived again and gave birth to our beautiful daughter, Maya. Indeed, Maya was a bundle of joy. She changed so much in our lives, especially Laura's. Laura loved Maya more than life itself, and she did almost everything to make sure Maya was healthy and happy. We treated Maya with so much love, and as she grew up, Laura pampered her with whatever she wanted. She got her the best dresses, shoes, school bags, and everything a girl child should have. There was no asking why Laura loved our daughter so much. Maya's pregnancy came with many complications, and as soon as she was born, Laura and I agreed that 1 child was enough. That way we could take good care of her, provide for her, and give her the best education. On the other hand, Maya grew to love us and spent more time with her mother. My work took at least 9 hours a day, and most times I would work overtime to make more money, so except evenings, holidays, and weekends, I barely had time to spend time with Maya, and most evenings she would already be in bed before I returned home. Honestly, I love the mother-daughter bond Laura and Maya shared, and within me I always wished I had the same relationship with my mom. Maya became our utmost priority. Her needs were first met before ours. Education-wise, we sent her to an excellent private school. Before Laura and I married, I knew her to be a go-getter and someone who gave her 100% to whatever she was doing, and somehow she passed the attribute to Maya. She always encouraged Maya to do well in school, make good friends, and be hardworking. She just wanted our daughter's life to be perfect, or so I believed initially. It started like motherly advice to her daughter, but as Maya grew older, it felt like she was imposing the whole good grades thing on her. She always wanted Maya to be on top of her class, read more, and play less. I even remember telling her to allow Maya to be a child, especially since having the highest grades was not the most important thing at that stage of her life, but her social skills with her friends and so much more. She was being too hard on Maya, and although Maya did not see it as hard on her, I was an adult and saw it very clearly. As Maya continued to grow, she became less interested in reading all the time because it did not allow her to spend time with her friends and neighbors, and Laura took this very personally. It took me a lot of talking before Laura stopped being too serious with our daughter, and I was relieved she was finally allowing Maya to act her age. About a month after Maya's 5th birthday, I was home that weekend, and Laura asked me to help her clean her car. Initially, I was reluctant because I knew how untidy her car was every time I cleaned it and how stressful it would be, but I did it anyway. I started by taking out the mats, cleaned the front, and as I was trying to clean the back, I found a pack of condoms in the driver's seat back pocket, and 2 pieces were cut out. Immediately I saw the condom, my heart skipped because we never did it in the car, and the condom wasn't my size. The fact that 2 pieces were missing indicated something was wrong, but I didn't want to confront her without being sure. Seeing the condom in her car definitely changed my attitude toward her for the rest of the weekend, but I lied to her and said I acted that way because of something at work. A couple of days after I found the condom, I secretly set up a dash cam in her car to see who she was having an affair with, if at all she was having an affair. Many thoughts and reasons the condom was in her car crossed my mind, and I thought about all the possible scenarios of someone leaving a condom in her car, but I didn't want to rule out the possibility of her cheating on me. Well, my worst nightmare happened 2 days after I hid the dash cam in her car. I found out no one left or forgot the condom in her car. My ex-wife was actually sleeping with someone else, and to my greatest surprise, it was my daughter's class teacher. Not only did I get videos from the dash cam I hid in her car, but I also got audio, and what I heard made my heart bleed. I was not only heartbroken, I was very disappointed because my wife was sleeping with our daughter's teacher, so he could give her the highest grades in her class. I could not believe she could go to that extreme with her highest grades obsession. Without thinking twice, I contacted the school board and reported everything to them with my evidence. I also confronted Laura that same day and kicked her out of the house in anger. In fact, most of her stuff was already waiting for her in the living room by the time she returned. When I told her I knew she was sleeping with Maya's teacher, she immediately went to her knees and started begging me. She said she did it for Maya and was trying to help her get the highest grades so it would help with her college applications and whatever. I was so angry, and I kicked her out of the house. At first, she didn't want to leave because she believed she was doing our daughter a favor. But after I yelled at her and my eyes were popping out, she left in fear because she had never seen me so angry. That same week, the school fired my daughter's class teacher, and I contacted a lawyer to start processing our divorce papers. On the other hand, Maya found out that her mother and I were divorcing, and she was so upset. I knew it was hard for her, and she was already asking questions, so I told her the truth so she could stay with me. Don't judge me. What her mother did was terrible, and I didn't try to sugarcoat it. Eventually, we divorced and I won child custody for Maya. I didn't want her mother putting terrible ideas of desperation in her head, and I believed I did the right thing. I didn't know it would get her like that, but Maya was hurt and stopped talking to Laura. The only time she speaks to Laura is when she is either yelling or screaming at her, and this makes Laura cry all the time, mainly because she loved Maya and did what she did because of her. I still don't know if it's true. It's been almost a year, and I have reduced my working hours to spend time with Maya. Although it still hurts me that Laura betrayed my trust and broke my heart, I'm glad she is not in my life anymore. I may remarry when I feel ready again, but for now, I want to spend time with my daughter and be the best father in the world. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Shocked when my daughter told me she was marrying the boy I raised as my own, who is 15 years older than her. I do not know what to say to her. I posted this on another Reddit, and it got taken down for the predatory nature of my daughter's relationship. I was told to try this sub in one other one. Here's the background. Hello? I am looking for a younger person's perspective on this matter. I know my son frequents this site, so we thought this might be the place to get it. My daughter is a 21-year-old female. Her fiancé is 36. She just graduated college and moved out on her own this past fall. My wife and I are 58 and 55 years old, respectively. We also have 2 sons. When my children were young, we had a close family friend who died tragically in 2001, leaving behind a 16-year-old. We took him into our home for over 4 years while he finished school and he was able to stand on his own. We gave him a substantial monetary donation to start his own business, which has since become wildly successful. I never minded any of this one bit because I always saw him as one of my own children. He is now 36 years old. This past Sunday, we had a family dinner, at which time my daughter decided to inform us that not only were they engaged, they had also been seeing each other for the past 3 years. My wife, sons, and I all feel incredibly betrayed and blindsided by this revelation. The amount of lies and secret-keeping they had to be telling to keep this relationship from us is astonishing. The large age difference is also very disturbing to us. I told both of them in no uncertain terms that I did not approve of this relationship, that he was no longer allowed in my home, and as long as my daughter continued this relationship, nor was she. I now see that alienating my daughter would cause more harm. I want to be there for her, but I do not want her to think I'm accepting of this relationship and want it to end immediately. I am disgusted and angered by my daughter's relationship I just recently found out about. However, I do not want to alienate my daughter and put her in more danger. How can I talk to her and make her realize this relationship is dangerous, predatory, and disturbing while still making her feel safe and welcome? Also, in case this wasn't clear enough, yes, he helped raise her. He babysat her, changed her diapers, came to family dinners every week, went on family vacations, etc. He was a constant part of her life since she was 1. Update 1. Hello everyone. I would first and foremost like to thank everyone who gave helpful words of advice and encouragement on my first post, which can be found here. I apologize for not being able to respond to all comments and messages, but my wife and I read through them all. We very much appreciate getting unbiased opinions from a demographic we normally would not. Yesterday, we went to my daughter's apartment because we know Jackson works all day Saturdays. I first apologized to her over my initial reaction that came out of anger. I made it clear that her safety and well-being was my first concern. We had a long discussion, and there were some things that my daughter said that alarmed me. These aren't necessarily in the order of which we discussed them, just things that stick out in my head. The first thing was that she said she knew she loved him since she was 14, at which point Jackson was 29. She says that they never did anything intimate until after she was 18. However, since their engagement has now become public, concerned family members have contacted me with events that seemed innocent at the time but now seem suspicious. For example, my wife's sister told us about a time when the kids, my daughter, one of my 2 sons, and Jackson were over her house. My daughter was 16, and Jackson was 31. My sister-in-law said that she heard Jackson leaving my daughter's room in the morning. At the time, she didn't think much of it because there have been times where the siblings or cousins have fallen asleep in each other's rooms after watching a movie late at night or something. My son also told me about a time when he had run into my daughter in town when she was 15 with Jackson when she was supposed to be in school. There are other instances I had to delete for length reasons. We asked her what it was she loved about him. She gave us a bunch of reasons, but one of the things that I think is alarming is she said how generous and caring he has always been to her. She told us about all the extra things he would give to her, for example, for her birthday or holidays, apart from the rest of the family. She doesn't think this is anything suspicious because he said that the reason he was giving her the additional gifts was because she was always overshadowed by her brothers and she deserved extra attention that she didn't get from her mother and I. My daughter told us that the decision to keep the relationship a secret was mutual. They thought that if her mother and I found out about the relationship, we would stop paying for her apartment and school tuition, and she has now graduated. She said they did not tell her friends because they didn't think it was right to ask them to lie to us as well. His friends were aware of the relationship. My wife asked if she had felt bad or guilty about all the lying they had to do to keep the relationship a secret. We were having weekly dinners for 3 years when they had been dating while they sat across the table from us pretending they weren't. My daughter had even made up boys she told us she had been dating at college a few times. She had posted photos of herself with a male friend and had told us that was a man she was dating. She said that she felt guilty about lying, but Jackson had told her that it would be worth it in the long run. I introduced the idea of family therapy. She said that she did not need it. I told her that she was always welcome into our home, though Jackson is not. She would like Jackson and I to speak, but I do not think that is a wise idea right now. I appreciate any input on this situation. Thank you. Adding additional worrisome incidents that I put in a comment. Her niece, who is her age, has told us that there were times when my wife and I would go out and Jackson would come over to hang out with them. She recalled multiple times when my daughter and Jackson would cuddle on the couch together under blankets, etc. This behavior never happened when my wife and I were home. There were times when my daughter had get-togethers at our house when we were out of town and Jackson would supply them with alcohol. My middle son, whose bedroom is the only one downstairs, had heard Jackson leaving our house late at night/early in the morning a few times, well after he had moved out and was not staying over. When he had asked him why he was there, Jackson had told him he had left things at our home and needed to pick them up. This would have been when my daughter was 15 to 18. My brother has told me on a family vacation Jackson had too much to drink and he overheard him calling my daughter Princess. At the time, he had assumed he was calling her this in a teasing sibling way, like an insult, but he realizes now he was saying it as a flirtatious pet name. She was 15. Update 2. I've received many messages asking for an update. The truth is my wife and I have decided to just accept the relationship. We have made it clear that we think it is inappropriate and we are furious and devastated at when the relationship began. However, my daughter has admitted that the reason they opened up about their relationship and engagement is because my daughter is currently 16 weeks pregnant with their first child. For the health of my daughter and grandchild, we believe the best thing to do is be supportive and make it clear to her that our door is always open to her. Unfortunately, my daughter has made it clear that she does not want any animosity or hostile feelings regarding her fiancé. We are no longer going to pursue charges against him because we do not believe that is best for the situation right now. Understandably, my two sons are not happy with what's going on. There was a physical altercation between Jackson and my oldest son. However, that has since been settled, and all parties have agreed to behave amicably for the sake of my daughter and her child. Thank you everyone for your words of advice and encouragement. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My wife and I married young in our early 20s. We both came from troubled homes with domestic abuse, sexual abuse, you name it. First time I was left to be tended to by government officials. I was, to my childhood, strengthened by convictions. Hers made her weak. I was in it for the long haul. Alcoholics Anonymous, Narcotics Anonymous, therapy, counseling, you name it. I was the person who showed up. Not anyone from her family. In our 4th year of marriage, she had an affair with a mutual friend. She trickled truth. An additional affair later. She followed the adultery handbook and denied. As I stood there with the evidence in my hand. Not an ounce of remorse existed. Then the evidence was presented. She broke down, blamed me. That our relationship wasn't moving forward. All my friends have kids. Blah blah blah. We had agreed in conversation multiple times that kids were to start at the 5-year mark. Imagine that communication and agreement in full force. She followed the remorseful playbook, gave a timeline, confessed to everything, allegedly. We did couples therapy and individual therapy. I found out when we were starting to try and have kids. I was thumbing through medical files and came across a receipt for an appointment in which the morning after pill was issued. It was recent at the time. I kept it and waited until I had hard evidence. Sure enough, she was pregnant. We did a blood test when our child was born. So, as mentioned, we proceeded with reconciliation. 12 years later, I can conclusively say reconciliation is an absolute waste of time and energy. My feelings for her were never the same. I could never look at her as my lover. We have sex. It's crazy intense, awesome, and kinky, probably due to her still carrying the guilt of her affair. Then it started. She started asking about having another child, about where we would retire together. All I can think is that. She's a fine partner, good-looking. Since reconciliation, she's been engaging, loving, and well-present in the relationship. All I can think is, who cares? I wasn't good enough to be faithful to at my peak. My peak physical condition, my peak mental and emotional states. She ripped the rug out from under me 12 years ago. I thought we had a great relationship then. Now I can't help but want to do the same. I've given her the kid she wanted, the house, the life. I've made sacrifices to make all this work. I'm done. I made an appointment with a divorce attorney. No more talks of the future. Dry your tears. This is the outcome you chose. You showed me there are no teammates in life. Now you can learn the same lesson when you feel it's all going so right. Here comes the rug pull. Enjoy it. I know I will. Enjoy my freedom from this monster. Now on to the next story. Story 10. I found out my wife was cheating on me. I was the happiest guy in marriage. It was the life for me. Sure, we had our arguments. In marriage, who doesn't? I think it's healthy to work out differences and be able to grow together. Anyways, I really cared about that girl. Would have done anything for her. A few months prior, my ex had gotten a new job. I was very excited for her. It wasn't long before I noticed her behavior changing. Taste in music, clothes, desires to smoke marijuana and drinking. This was something that really threw me off. We had agreed before marriage we were going to avoid any substances like that. It's trash. I leave for a weekend golf trip with friends. No, this is not a common occurrence. The day I plan to come home, I call her and tell her I'll be home later than evening and that I love her. She never said that she loved me back. This really was odd to me. I pushed to find out why. She says we will talk when I get home. I have a pit in my stomach, really wondering what is going on. When I get home, she tells me that I've been a terrible husband since we got married and that she had been trying to help me become a better husband, but I just wasn't capable. This really threw me for a loop. I thought things were great. We were so happy together. I thought I looked up to my wife. I really believed that I had failed somewhere. I legit thought she was an angel and I screwed up. I just couldn't put my finger on it. She proceeded to tell me she was leaving for a few days to her mother's. I was broke. Sat in the shower for an hour or two. My world was torn. Everything I thought my life would be was now uncertain. All the energy, work, time I had put into the marriage was all for nothing. I didn't know. I shot her a text telling her how sorry I was. I just didn't know what I was actually apologizing for. She comes home a few days later and proceeds to tell me I need to leave. I did. Looking back, I can't believe I did. Terrible move. I leave to my parents for a few days. One night, my dad asks me why the hell I am still at his home. Out of love, and I didn't have an answer. Nothing was making sense. Nothing was being fixed while we were apart. I hopped in my car and drove back home to make this work. Heart is pounding as I open the door to find her on the couch, wide-eyed. She frantically starts texting on her phone. I don't really notice that part, but I remember that I ask her what I need to do to make this work. She tells me I have to leave or she will call the police. I'm like, what the hell? This is my home. She tells me she is having friends over for a party. A married couple from church come over who were our friends, and they were shocked to see me there. Their arms are full with liquor, way more liquor than they needed for the three of them. They knew this wasn't okay with me. The husband of the couple couldn't stand to be in the room with me and quickly left. I was so confused. Am I really getting divorced and have no idea why? What's going on? I went to bed in my bed. Sick. She is in the living room with her friend. Quiet. I asked my wife the next morning to go to counseling. She says she doesn't want to. I beg her and finally get her to go. That was pointless. I ask her as we are leaving the appointment if she is dating someone else. She says no. I'm so lost and broken. Driving home, I could care less if a semi-truck hit me head-on. That was a dark place to be. I believe in God, and I pray a lot. I felt the urge to go to my wife's relatives, who I had a good relationship with. I drive up to their home and sit on their couch. They seem to know what's going on between us, and they tell me how sorry they are for me and that I shouldn't take this shit any longer. That they aren't surprised this is happening, as my ex has done similar things in the past before I knew her. I break down in tears on the couch. Finally, some validation from people who weren't supposed to be on my team. I knew it was over but still didn't know why. I moved money from the bank account. I grab valuables from my home since I know she is at a friend's sleeping over. She calls and cusses me out and says a plethora of things I don't remember. Once she sees money gone, probably can't write them here. Anyways, get ready. The next day, I grab a form to get her off my joint bank account. I go to her work to get the paper signed and notarized. I'm leaving the parking lot when a relative of hers calls me and tells me that she has been cheating on me with a coworker this entire time. I broke. It felt amazing and sickening at the same time. Amazing because I could finally make sense out of it all. Sick because how could she do this to me? She loved me, was supposed to. When she saw me suffering, how could she not feel bad? When I told her I wanted to die, and she told me that she didn't care and that I should get help. How could someone do this? How could she gaslight me for months? Make me question my sanity. I called her and she admitted to the affair. I said some things in a rage. All I remember is I wanted her to change her last name because she is a disgrace to my family. She still hasn't. Remember, I've had a great life. I surround myself with people I trust. I avoid drama. I don't know how to act when lied to. I loved her to death. I didn't know the guy she had an affair with. I wanted to stop my car and confront the guy. Thank goodness I didn't. My emotions were at an all-time high. Crushed. I don't even know if this thread makes sense at this point. It was over. Divorce took longer than I wanted, for some reason. She felt entitled to a lot of things, the ring and basically all our gifts from the wedding. She must have really done some mental gymnastics to make herself feel like a victim. Unconscionable. All I got from the marriage was a toaster. It's a joke in the family now. I didn't want that stuff anyways. Bunch of horcruxes lol. Also, thank goodness we didn't have any kids. I'm here to tell all of you that it gets better. Divorce is not a bad thing. I have a nice townhome now. I'm dating a lot. There are so many great girls. Wow. I have my great job still. So much to be thankful for. I can honestly say that I don't hate my ex. She is nothing to me. Like a long-lost memory. I don't even remember the color of her eyes or her phone number. Couldn't care less what happens with her, as I wouldn't know how to find out if I wanted to. I've cut off contact with everyone in her family, and there were some great people there. I think they all knew what was going on all along. Just glad one of them came clean to me. Once again, hang in there. Know your worth. I believe that I have good things coming. I'll look back one day and be so glad my life worked out the way it did. It's all a blur now, and I apologize for the wordy post. I was surprised I couldn't remember a whole lot more. That's a good thing though, right? We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.